In the bright room, Solon's mentor decisively says that she has a clear order for him, extends her hand, and hands over a sealed document, explaining that this is his next task. The document is indeed official. It bears an exquisite coat of arms with many small details. It is the only letter the teacher has given him, and it weighs much more than it seems. When Solon reads the contents, he cannot hide his surprise and immediately understands. This information is a big deal. He is offered the position of a private tutor, and Solon, a commoner and former adventurer, realizes that such a job could completely change the course of his life. The action shifts to the eastern lands of the Thracian Empire. The city is bustling with people, and a train rushes swiftly through its outskirts. Later, someone approaches Solon, first apologizing, then delivering bad news. The man directly tells Solon that he is being expelled from the group. Solon stands stunned, unable to comprehend why this happened so suddenly. A man named Creon stands by the window and looks back at Solon while the conversation continues. Solon tries to clarify the situation and asks Creon if he is really just being dismissed, and Creon looks coldly and confirms that this is indeed the case. Creon officially puts an end to it. He informs Solon that he is being dismissed from the position of deputy captain, and worse, stripped of membership in the entire organization. Solon lowers his gaze, tension rises in the room, and Creon asks if he should tell him the real reason why he is being expelled. Solon does not back down, and with a sarcastic smile, tells Creon that it would be very kind of such an important holy knight as you to finally explain himself. Just at that moment, the girl interrupts the conversation by stomping her boot on the floor to attract their attention. The sorceress with long dark hair stepped forward, pointed her finger at Solon, and shouted that the reason for his exile was obvious: he was completely useless to the group. Solon closes his eyes and remains silent while she continues, saying that it has already been decided he is simply dead weight. Solon is clearly upset and defends himself, saying that it is wrong to call him useless, he has always worked hard. The girl mage waved him off and admitted frankly, although he can use magical swords, attack with spells, and even heal a little in reality, he is mediocre at everything. She begins to compare him with the rest of the team. She says that Gurlis is responsible for defense, and Creon is a master swordsman of the highest level, adding that her offensive magic is much stronger than anything he can show. She continues and says that they even have a leader, Sophia, who handles all the high-level healing magic. Solon stands in the middle of the room, completely broken, realizing that he has been replaced in all roles. Solon finally speaks and asks where Sophia is, noticing that the leader is actually not here to watch him being expelled. Creon explains that while Sophia is not here, all the group leaders have decided to exile him, and she fully agrees with this. Solon tries to object, pointing out that he should also be one of those leaders. Creon cast an icy glance at him and coldly asked if Solon still does not understand, then directly told him that he is no longer a leader. Solon looks completely broken when he is told that the group simply does not need an extra burden that slows them down. Solon does not back down and reminds them that he was the one who made the night order so great, loudly listing everything from recruiting members and finding money to planning dungeon raids, and asks if they can deny his merits. Creon didn't even flinch. They said they appreciated what he had done before, but had already decided he was no longer needed on the team. The room froze, and the chasm between Solon and his former friends seemed wider than ever. Solon clenches his fist tightly. He can endure being kicked out, but the way they did it really hurts. He recalls memories of when he, Creon, and Sophia were still children and made promises to each other. It seems unfair to him that they couldn't at least talk to him about it before making the final decision. Moving on, Solon just stands still with a bitter expression and can't say anything more. In the next scene, Creon puts a hand on Solon's shoulder and mercilessly sends him away, effectively forcing him to turn around and leave the room forever. The girl mage doesn't even look him in the eyes when she coldly says goodbye to Solon. Creon falls silent for a moment, then decisively tells Solon, "Just pack your things and leave immediately." Just as Solon was about to leave, a hand reached out to him, and he didn't expect it at all. Creon looks at him and says that they should at least shake hands goodbye. He quietly says that since they are no longer on the same team, they need to change how they talk to each other, especially considering they've been together since the School of Magic. Solon sighs and agrees that they should at least part as friends, though he can't help but notice that Creon hasn't changed at all. Finally, their hands clasped. The last handshake definitively ended their partnership. Solon smiled slightly and told Creon that over the years he had truly become stronger. When they let go, Creon lowered his eyes and admitted that his ambition had grown from the weakness he once had. Creon looks around with a defiant smile and says that now everything is different and the whole country knows how powerful he has become. Crayon looked at Solon and said that finally the time had come for them to finish everything. And then he shocked, telling Solon that Sophia had actually agreed for him to be expelled from the party for his own good. Solon was completely stunned and could not believe his ears. Crayon explained that now their group was heading into much more dangerous dungeons, and assured that Sophia was simply afraid that Solon might get hurt or die. He tells Solon not to worry anymore about the knights, or Sophia from now on he himself will take care of her in everything. Solon, confused by the wording, frowned and asked what he meant by taking care of her alone. Crayon looks him straight in the eyes and reveals that he and Sophia are actually engaged. It turned out that rumors about them had long been circulating in the guild. They had been close for a very long time. When Solon leaves, he thinks that at least he expected honesty from them, but instead they kept him in the dark all this time. Solon forces a smile and says that he finally understood how everything really is. Solon returns in his thoughts to a much happier time when someone greeted him. A sincere, calm smile appears on his face as he remembers the past. In the memory, younger Solon, with a sparkle in his eyes, tells his friends that he plans to create his own night order as soon as they all finish their studies. Sophia asks with interest if she and Crayon can join, and Solon answers without hesitation that of course they can. Solon tells Sophia that he wants her to take care of the group's healing, and she glows with excitement, assuring him that he can definitely count on her. The conversation shifts to Crayon. It turns out he wants to become a knight. Young Solon, a little depressed, admits that it's true, but he feels too weak. But Solon does not give up for long. He reassures his friends that everything will be fine because he will support both with his magical swordsmanship, and hearing this, the other two gradually agree. Solon smiles broadly and says that the deal is officially made. Looking at his friends, Solon proudly declares that the three of them are officially the very first members of their future night order. The three children put their hands in a circle. Solon called everyone to unite to create the most powerful knightly order the Empire has ever seen, and Sophia and Crayon promise to give him all their strength. Returning to the present, the memory fades, and Solon sits in the back seat of the carriage. He looks gloomy, clearly hurt by how much everything has changed since those childhood promises. He sharply shakes off the gloomy mood and stretches his hands, realizing he was starting to doze off. He looks outside. They are already approaching the imperial capital. Solon was looking at the floor of the moving carriage and quietly wondered how many more days were left until they finally reached the imperial capital. Lost in thought, he suddenly notices that right next to him sits a little girl who is holding a basket tightly and keeps looking at him as if she wants to say something. Finally, the girl spoke and asked if something was on his mind, and this completely caught Solon by surprise. She quickly apologizes for staring so long, but Solon just smiles and says it's not a big deal. While they talk, he notices that her clothes look quite good for an ordinary traveler. The girl introduced herself as Clarice and said she works as a servant in the imperial palace, so he shouldn't worry that she seemed suspicious. In person, Solon is truly impressed and tells her so directly. Clarice blushes a little, scratches her head, and says she didn't mean to brag at all. Another passenger asks if she is going home, and Clarice explains that she is only visiting family. She turns back to Solon and says he doesn't have to be so formal. She is clearly younger than him. Solon returns to his first question and asks why she was looking at him at Alland. She instantly blushes. Editor, Clarice asks him what his name is, and although Solon agrees to say it, he immediately has doubts whether his real name is a good idea. She admits that she was just looking for someone to talk to pass the time, and he seemed the only peer near Bisso. She started watching him. Solon decides to take a false name and introduces himself to Clarice as David, smiling and saying he is glad to meet her, and Clarice cheerfully replies that the feeling is mutual. Clarice points to the sword he carries and asks if it is a magical sword, wondering if he is a real magical swordsman. Solon is impressed that she noticed and says she has a sharp eye. Clarissa rejoiced that she was right. She proudly says that she knows a bit about such things, although she has never seen a real magical sword in her life, and Solon, interested, asks how exactly she recognized it. She beams with a smile and explains that it is because the famous Solon is also a magical swordsman. Solon suddenly hears his name and repeats it in response, and Clarice enthusiastically confirms she is talking about him. She excitedly asks David if he has heard of Solon, praising him as incredibly cool and confessing that she is actually a huge fan of his. Clarice begins to list his legendary feats, saving a saint and fearless battles with demons in ancient ruins. She calls him a true knight among knights, while Solon sits nearby thinking that he is not nearly as impressive as her words paint him. She does not stop praising him, and Solon realizes that he definitely did the right thing by not revealing his real name. Clarice enthusiastically says how inspired she is that Solon started as an ordinary commoner and rose to become the deputy captain of the most powerful knight order of the empire. Solon just listens and responds briefly while she continues to express her admiration for him. To him, Solon silently keeps his thoughts to himself because he feels that he no longer belongs to that order and was redundant and useless there. Meanwhile, Clarice tells him that ordinary people live in peace only because adventurers like Solon, and now David, clear the ruins. Everything was going well until the horse suddenly neighed and reared up on its hind legs, causing the carriage to jerk sharply with a screech. Clarice, suddenly thrown by the jolt, cried out in fear as she was tossed inside. Solon instantly lunged forward and caught Clarice before she could hit anything, holding her firmly. He asked if she was okay, and she, still confused, only managed to thank him, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Clarice nervously looks around and aloud wonders why they just stopped in the middle of nowhere. While she is puzzled, Solon already has a serious expression as he carefully surveys the surroundings. Solon's expression sharpens as he realizes this is exactly what he feared, and he tells her directly that they are under attack. Clarice freezes upon hearing this, but Solon does not hesitate. He moves toward the door and whispers to her to stay low and not move. She nervously nods and promises to do as he says. Having stepped out, Solon instantly surveys the situation and sees the guards are already knocked out. Around the carriage, he counts approximately 4 to 6 enemies, positioned in front and behind. The large, bald bandit leader with a scar on his head strides forward, laughing and resting his sword on his shoulder, clearly enjoying the moment, and shouting that the people in the carriage seem to be worth a lot of money. The leader leans down to get a better look at his trophies, counts them one by one, and notices that inside are 3 men and 1 girl. His eyes fixate on Clarice, and he coldly says that she looks like a refined young lady. Clarice is utterly terrified. She clutches her belongings and trembles while the bandit pays attention to her. The gang leader smiles to himself, thinking how lucky he is today. But at that moment, Solon steps out of the carriage and stands opposite, forcing the bandit to stop and look up. Solon steps out of the carriage with a look that clearly shows he is ready for action. The door creaked as he moved, and the other passengers, sitting safely in their seats, watched him with wide eyes. The bandit leader is unimpressed. He looks the boy up and down for a long time and asks if he is really trying to be a hero and protect the people inside. Solon does not hesitate. He looks straight at the boy and says, "Yes, that is exactly what I am going to do." At first the leader laughed out loud. Waving him off, he asked Solon if he really thinks he can handle the bandits from Jet Black Mountain alone. Zone, hearing the gang's name, the young passenger David in the background panics, while Solon remains calm. He repeats the name as if nothing and says he does not intend to hold back. They better just leave. Now, that remark definitely hit a nerve. The bandit leaders stood opposite the Titans. One had a vein bulging on his forehead. He glanced at Solon, said he had a big mouth, and decided that was enough. The leader growls that Solon will regret his arrogance, and while he speaks, Solon cold-bloodedly draws his sword. The metal clicks in place. The chief loses patience and shouts loudly to his men, "Kill Solon." The entire gang of bandits lets out a loud roar and rushes toward the carriage. David screams in fear as the fight begins. Solon does not look back. His eyes are fixed on the approaching enemies. Just as the fight was about to start, something makes the bandits freeze. In a flash of heat and fire, a figure in a hood suddenly appears, and the attackers are completely unprepared for this. The gang leader is stunned. He can barely comprehend what just happened when the situation suddenly turns against him. One of the bandits howled, and the others suddenly realized that Solon is not an ordinary fighter but a magical swordsman, and panic seized them as he charged forward. The leader tries to stay calm and shouts that flashy tricks won't work on him. He swings his massive blade with all his might and promises to crush Solon into the ground. Solon does not retreat. His blade burns with heat, and he watches the leader intently, searching for the perfect moment to end the fight. Like lightning, Solon rushed forward and plunged his sword straight into the gang leader's chest. The rest of the gang froze in horror, watching their boss being taken away, and someone in disbelief shouted, "Leader." Solon calmly pulls the sword from the body, and the rest of the bandits lose their heads. They curse him and cannot believe that some boy just dealt with their strongest man. Solon stands, his face covered in blood, and his cold gaze makes the survivors tremble and stammer with fear. The bandits immediately retreated. One of them asks Solon to wait, saying he has saved money and will pay just to be spared. The boy glances at his friends to make sure they will pay too, and sees that everyone agrees. Then he asks Solon if they can just write it off and part ways. One of the bandits tries to buy his way out with money, desperately asking Solon how much he needs to pay to be released, even presenting it as a profitable deal for Solon, promising to give any amount named. Solon is not interested in money and coldly tells the bandit that he has nothing to talk about with him before the bandit can react. Solon deals with him once and for all. Having dealt with the rest of the bandits, Solon stands among the bodies with a sword in his hand, finally putting an end to this uneven fight. The end, when everything quiets down, Solon stands grim and thinks to himself, although this is not the first time he has had to kill, it never gets easier. Suddenly David shouted to him from the carriage, pulling Solon out of his gloomy thoughts. Solon asks if everyone is okay, and David leans out to say that thanks to his help, no one even has a scratch. On them, Clarice also peeks out of the carriage a bit shaken, but wanting to be helpful. She asks if they can help him with anything. Solon nods gratefully and asks them to check if the carriage is still in good enough condition to be moved so they can leave. David nods briefly and goes to check the carriage, leaving Solon alone with his thoughts again as he looks at his hand. He looks at his hand and suddenly realizes, no matter how many times he has done this, he will never get used to the feeling of taking someone's life. David waved from the carriage and shouted to Solon, letting him know that everything was ready and they could set off. Solon briefly responded, confirming that he heard. David paused for a moment, looked at Solon, and sincerely thanked him for intervening and saving them from the bandits. Clarice, standing aside, asks what Solon has done. David understands that Solon is holding a memorial service for the dead, but thinks it's over the top to do that because of some robbers. Still, David admits that they couldn't just leave the bodies lying there, and understands why Solon has to do something. Solon stands alone in the forest over one of the fallen and quietly begins a prayer. Reaching out his hand, he begs to save the soul of the one he just killed. He knows that his prayers probably mean little. He is not a priest or a saint, but it seems better to say at least something than just to leave. Suddenly David's voice cut through the silence, asking if he would be long, and this caught Solon by surprise. Solon quickly apologizes and heads back to the carriage to join the others. When the carriage moved again under the night sky, Clarice told David that he really resembles Solon. Solon was a bit stunned when the conversation turned to him. He pretends to be calm and says that it is an honor for him to be compared to such a legend. Clarice admits that she has never truly met the famous Solon. Solon listens and smiles to himself. He finds it funny because he is literally sitting right here nearby, but remains silent. And Clarice adds that she is sure the real Solon is as strong and capable as David. Solon only laughs nervously and awkwardly agrees with her assessment. He thought to himself that he is definitely not perfect and cannot do everything, but he is simply glad that for now everyone is fine. Clarice smiles from ear to ear and says that she is just very happy that they all survived the bandit attack. When the adrenaline subsides and she feels safe, Clarice admits that she suddenly feels completely exhausted. Solon advises her to sleep a little. They will reach the next town only by noon. He hands her a blanket to make her more comfortable, and she agrees. While she settles under the blanket, Solon gently says to her good night. As soon as she gets comfortable, Clarice calls him. Solon looks back and asks what she has on her mind. She pauses for a moment to sincerely thank him for standing up and protecting them from the bandits. Solon barely nods and says yes to Clarice as she settles in for the night. He sits in the quiet carriage and thinks that when someone thanks you for protecting them, your soul suddenly feels warm even if you are a complete mess. His thoughts pull him back to life with the night order. He remembers how he was once completely focused on protecting Sophia, Creon, and other comrades, but now he feels he has lost the right to be their protector. He looks completely broken when he admits to himself that he simply no longer has the strength to protect those guys or even fight alongside them. He gazes into the void and thinks, where does this place him? When the carriage rushes under the stars, he begins to ask himself what exactly he now needs to protect. Finally reaching the imperial capital, Solon looked around the bustling streets and thought that quite some time had passed since the last time he was in the city. He decides it's time to move. First, he needs to settle a few matters. He stops by a stall and asks the saleswoman for 4 of the items displayed there. She packs them and hands them to him. Solon walks away with the purchase, hoping that those he is visiting have not changed their taste since he last saw them. Standing before the huge clock tower in the capital, Solon holds his suitcase and wonders how his old professor is doing nowadays. He arrives at the Imperial Academy of Magic, the very place where he, Sophia, and Creon studied. Although he is a commoner, he still managed to get an education at this elite school for nobles. He got there only thanks to his former master, a nobleman, who was kind enough to allow him to attend while he worked as a servant. It was in this school that the whole group met and befriended each other, and then, after graduation, they created their night order and fought side by side. Solon walks through familiar corridors and knocks on the door with a heavy hammer shaped like a lion's head. He peeks into the room, apologetically exclaiming, "Professor Lucy." In a huge, book-filled study, a woman at the desk lifted her head from her work and looked surprised at the unexpected visitor. The woman is Professor Lucy. She smiled warmly at Solon and said she was glad he came. Throwing her hair back, she remarked with a slight smile that he rarely appears so suddenly in the capital, and directly asked him if something had happened that made him return. Solon smiled and told her that a lot of time had passed. He considers Lucy his true mentor, a legendary magical genius who, as a teenager, earned a prestigious teaching position at the academy. Lucy said she had heard the Night Order was busy in the east, and asked Solon if he was the only one who returned to the capital. Solon confirmed that he was indeed alone there. Lucy looked thoughtfully and quietly hummed under her breath, studying him carefully. She stared at him intently for a moment, began to say his name, and suddenly fell silent as if she noticed something. Lucy jokingly asked if he was just standing and looking at her, enchanted by her beauty, and Solon immediately realized that her character had not changed at all since their last meeting. Solon gave in a little and admitted that he mostly looked because he simply could not lie and say he was not looking. At this, Lucy looked incredibly self-satisfied, hiding her smile behind her hand. She boasted that it was perfectly natural for him to stare after all. She was such a beauty. Solon just looked at her and thought she had not changed at all, although he had long gotten used to her ego. Lucy teased when he was a student. Everyone probably envied him. He had such a beautiful professor mentor, and Solon responded with a laugh, reminding her that she was still just a girl back then. Lucy pretends to be annoyed that he always picks on her words, but then she stops pretending and asks how his time at the academy really went. Solon tells her it was a real nightmare. Every day he was bombarded with hostility from other students. It got to the point where people even challenged him to duels, and Lucy was stunned by how much drama he had to endure. Solon explains that back then everyone looked at him sideways and wondered why a simple guy was even at the academy, and he admits himself he was no genius with either the sword or magic. Lucy is blunt and agrees that he was always an average guy, and Solon doesn't even try to argue because he knows it's true. Lucy honestly tells him there was no elaborate secret reason why she took him under her wing. This caught Sol off guard. He looks quite surprised. She becomes serious, looks him straight in the eyes, and says she chose him as a student for one simple reason: she saw talent in him, and makes it clear that this was the only thing that mattered to her. Solon lowers his eyes as if he can't accept the compliment. He tells her he doesn't consider himself talented at all. Lucy instantly dismisses his doubts, saying that he actually achieved a lot. He was the one who created the most powerful Night Order in the Empire, and his accomplishments rival those of any elite adventurer. Doesn't he see what a great achievement that is? Solon looks quite depressed, pointing out an obvious gap in her logic. He reminds her that despite everything she just said, he was still kicked out of the very group he helped create. This caught Lucy by surprise, and she directly asks him what he means by saying he was kicked out. Later, Solon flops down on the couch and tells her in detail how everything went wrong. After listening, Lucy lowers her eyes and says she really regrets that it turned out that way. Solon pretends it's no big deal, saying, well, nothing can be done. The Night Order no longer needed him. When Lucy hears this, her patience snaps and she explodes. What are you even thinking saying that? She starts losing control, shouting that the whole situation is just terrible, and points out how foolishly they are rejecting him after all. He was the one who actually raised that order of knights, and Solon just sits there looking completely stunned by how angry she got for him. Solon looks at Lucy with a gentle smile and sincerely thanks her for everything she said. Over tea, Solon sighs and admits, I am just a jack of all trades. I know I will never become as strong a figure as Crayon, Sophia, or even Lucy herself. Don't you think the same? Lucy listens to him but does not quite agree. She says that although it may seem so to him, he does not just have basic skills. There is something more hidden inside him, and she definitely knows. It is a completely different kind of strength. Solon asks if she is just saying this to cheer him up because he is sad. Lucy suggests going further she will hug and stroke his head if he wants, but Solon immediately refuses. Moving on, Lucy asks what his plans for the future are. Solon replies that for now he will stay in the imperial capital, but first and foremost for him is to find a new job. Hearing this, Lucy decides the moment is perfect and tells him, if you need a job, look at what I am holding. She hands him a paper, and Solon looks at it, puzzled and curious. What is she giving him? Solon glanced at the paper, saw the job description, and asked in surprise if she was really offering him to become a tutor. Lucy looked at him confidently and confirmed. As his former mentor, she appoints this as his next official assignment. Solon examined the document and froze. It bore the official seal of the imperial family, so he asked Lucy what was going on, because this is not just ordinary teaching. Lucy pointed to the paper in Solon's hands and said to him, everything you need to know is written right here. She firmly told him that his new job is to be the personal tutor of the 18th princess of the empire, a girl named Philia. Solon is completely stunned by this news, and Lucy just sweetly looked at him and said that he is lucky to have such a wonderful mentor who cares about him. Lucy explains the backstory of the request. Princess Philia admires adventurers and has long been looking for a magical swordsman with strong moral principles who uses his power to help those in need, but finding someone who truly fit this image turned out to be very difficult. Lucy tells him that she finally found the very person for this task. Solon does not deny that he fits, but still does not understand why someone from the royal family would go to such trouble to find someone like him. Solon tries to argue, but Lucy immediately cuts him off, saying that despite his thoughts, he is perfect for the role of a teacher. She emphasizes, his name is known throughout the imperial capital, so it is quite natural that the princess has heard stories about him. Solon is still a bit skeptical and asks Lucy, how can she be so confident about all this? Lucy simply smiles and says that he is her star student and she is proud of him. Later, Solon heads to the palace. At the gates, a guard stops him and asks what he needs, so Solon shows the letter of introduction that Lucy gave him. The guard checks the letter and tells Solon that he may enter. Solon thanks him and heads into the palace courtyard. Looking around, Solon begins to feel a little out of place. He wonders if the royal family really called someone like him. He recalls Lucy's face and how she told him, everything will be fine. Solon pauses for a moment and says to himself, I can do this, then with a determined step moves forward to enter the game. Lucy's voice still sounds in his head, encouraging him she knows he will manage, and Solon admits that he is a bit nervous, but he will not let this stop him. Deciding that since he already agreed to this job, he will give it all his strength and goes to the palace, while Lucy's voice encourages him, reminding him that he will become a wonderful teacher for the princess. The imperial palace is huge. It towers in the very heart of the capital, built on all the wealth and the most modern technologies of the empire, and it is here that the emperor, empress, and the entire royal family live. Walking through the grounds, Solon suddenly realizes, the last time he was here was at the graduation from the Magic Academy, and the scale of this place is simply impressive. It is much larger than anything he is used to. He smiled to himself, thinking that he would never have guessed that this place would become his new job. Walking, he recalls Lucy's words. Although Philia is a princess, she is only 18th in line, so in reality she has neither power nor influence in the palace. Professor Lucy sadly explains, since the princess's mother died, she has no one in the palace who would support or stand up for her. She says that because the princess is so isolated, it was necessary to find a teacher who could be truly trusted, and Solon nods. Finally he understands why so much depends on this job. Lucy initially says that the palace turned to the Magic Academy for a recommendation, but quickly corrects herself. It turns out the request was sent directly to her personally. Solon was a little surprised, but Lucy simply said that she has her own connection with the princess. She added that she is just happy they finally found the perfect person for this role. Looking him straight in the eyes, Lucy said to Solon, I am counting on you. Take good care of the princess. Walking through the palace, Solon thought that he had not seen Lucy so serious for a long time, and it struck him how important this task is. Walking further inside the building, Solon notices a maid quietly standing in the middle of the corridor. He notices how young she is, and involuntarily wonders if she is waiting for someone. Just at that moment, she raises her head and catches his gaze. The girl asks if he is Solon, and when he answers, yes, she introduces herself as Rhea and says she is one of Princess Philia's personal attendants. Rhea politely bows and offers to lead him to the princess's room. Solon thanks her and follows. Solon sincerely thanks Rhea for her help and kindness as she led him through the palace. Rhea falls silent for a moment and simply looks at him, and Solon suddenly realizes that perhaps he was too formal. Rhea giggles and tells Solon that the rumors are true. He really is a very nice guy, and there is no need to be so ceremonious with a maid. Solon blushes a little embarrassed and apologizes, admitting that he is just quite nervous about the whole situation. Rhea smiles. It's funny to imagine such a famous hero like him being nervous, so she offers to carry his bag, and Solon thanks her, but insists that he does not consider himself a true hero. Even when he denies it, Rhea looks him in the eyes and says that in her imagination he definitely is. She smiles warmly and says she is simply happy to have the chance to talk with such a hero. Solon thanks her but is noticeably embarrassed by all these compliments. Rhea moves on again and tells him to follow her this way. They walk when Rhea suddenly stops and calls him by name. Solon turns around to find out what she wants. Lowering her eyes to the floor, Rhea asks him how she can one day become as strong as he is. Solon suddenly froze at the question Rhea had just asked him. Rhea confesses that she actually wants to become a magic swordsman, like him. She's afraid that being only a beginner, she might cross the line, but Solon objects. No, not at all. He actually believes she has more natural talent than he does. Rhea asks if he is serious, and Solon definitely says yes, he himself is a magic swordsman, so he can sense when someone has true talent for magic. Solon thought that with the right training she could even become a legendary sage, and stars shone in Ria's eyes. She asked if he would become her master. Solon is completely shocked by this unexpected request. Ria says she is sure if he personally teaches her, she will be able to become strong. He smiles at her a little awkwardly and says that maybe she is right, but he wonders where all this suddenly came from. Ria goes on and asks if he can somehow arrange for her to get into the Academy of Magic. She begins to stumble over her words and is a little embarrassed to ask for such a big favor. Ria lowered her gaze to the ground and said she knows for someone like her, it is probably impossible to get in there. Solon suddenly understood everything and thought to himself, if Ria really had the opportunity to get into the academy, she would hardly be working here as a servant. As if coming to her senses, Ria turns her gaze back to Solon and tries to push the conversation forward. She smiles broadly, apologizes for saying something so strange, explains that she just got a little carried away with emotions, and asks him not to pay attention to it. She sets off again and tells him that they are almost at the princess's room, but Solon stops her. He calls her to wait, and Ria turns around to see what he wants. Solon is a little embarrassed, but says that if she doesn't mind, he could at least give her some advice or talk to her. He adds that since he will be teaching the princess anyway, helping her is not a problem. Ria's eyes lit up at this offer. Ria asks if he is really serious, demands a promise. Solon says yes. She starts jumping for joy and thanking him, and he just says that it's not a big deal at all. In a great mood, Ria urges him toward the room, and Solon follows, worrying whether he will get in trouble for talking so much on his first day. Finally, they reach their destination. Ria points to the door and says this is the princess's room, and Solon sincerely thanks her for the help. Ria tells Solon to come in immediately and sharply opens the door. The sudden click of the handle and the wide swing of the door completely caught Solon by surprise. Inside, Solon simply loses his head. She just barged into the princess's room without even knocking, and he panics and nervously tries to come up with some polite greeting as he enters, stammering. He follows her into the room, but Ria suddenly stops, looks around, and makes a puzzled sound. The chair by the window is empty, and Ria notices with disappointment that the person they are looking for is not here. She hurriedly looks around the area and asks aloud where Princess Philia has gone. But suddenly the mood changed. Ria lowered her eyes and apologized to Solon for lying to him. She began nervously twisting her hair and admitted that she actually just wanted to understand what kind of person he is. For a second the room froze, the maid's mask began to slip. Ria, smiling with relief, says she is glad he turned out to be as kind as she had hoped. Solon looks at her in complete shock. Something finally clicks in his head, and he begins to ask who she really is. Standing is a smiling girl, whom Solon considered just a useful servant, and suddenly it turns out that before him is Princess Philia herself. Philia officially introduced herself to Solon and confirmed that her real name is Philia. Solon is clearly stunned, repeats her name, unable to comprehend that he is really standing before the princess. He asks for confirmation, and she simply nods. Smiling cheerfully, she tells him that for the most part she really is the princess of this country. When Solon looks out the window, the weight of the situation finally dawns on him, and he quietly admits that now everything is much clearer. Philia leans back and explains her little trick. She actually wanted to see who he was when he wasn't trying to impress kings, and says that people usually get tense and awkward around her, so she assumed he would be the same. Solon admits that anyone with common sense would be nervous here, but Philia tells him that she quickly realized her worries were pointless. She continues, although he is extremely strong, he is not arrogant at all. She feels that he is actually very modest and kind, even better than those rumors. Solon is a bit confused and tries to tell her that he is not really such a good guy, but suddenly freezes mid-sentence when he notices her movement. Suddenly Philia realizes this and freezes in panic. She is embarrassed that she talked so much and didn't even offer tea, so she asks him to wait while she prepares some tea. Solon tries to stop her in horror and asks if the princess really intends to brew the tea herself. Philia just gives him a look and in response asks if that should be a problem, as if she is totally fine continuing her role as a servant. Solon watches as the tea is poured. Looking very tense, he mentally cannot believe this is really happening and starts to worry if it is normal for the princess to serve tea to him specifically. Solon tries to intervene and offer to do it himself, but Philia just winks at him and says, "Stop treating me like a child. Brewing a cup of tea is the easiest thing in the world." Philia tells him to keep his eyes open and watch closely, and at that moment she snaps her fingers. A small flash of light appears to heat everything up. Solon is truly impressed, noticing that although it is just basic fire magic, she really has it under control. Philia looks proud, explaining that the secret to a good cup of tea is to bring the water to a full boil. While she pours the water, Solon cannot get the thought out of his head, who actually taught her magic. After a few moments, Philia places the cup in front of him and says that everything is ready. She asks Solon to try and sincerely says that she really hopes he will like it. Solon raises the cup and agrees to drink a little. Solon took a sip of hot tea, and Philia watched him intently, waiting for his reaction. The branch asks him what he thinks about it, and Solon says that it is actually wonderful and notes that the tea leaves she used must be of the highest quality. Philia was completely shocked by his words, lost her composure for a moment, and asked if he could really determine how good the tea leaves were from just one sip. Solon says he studied this topic a little and asks if this tea is a spring harvest from the Grey Kingdom. Philia enthusiastically replies that he guessed exactly right. Philia was wildly impressed that he could learn all this from just a sip, but Solon simply waved it off and told her it was no big deal and Yon could do the same if they studied a little. He recalls the times in the night show he had to conduct trade to keep their funds under control, and because of this, he learned a bunch of various things. Philia suddenly became a little quiet and quietly admitted that she was actually very glad, and Solon looked at her, a little surprised by her sudden change of mood. Solon asks why she shines with joy, and Philia, looking him straight in the eyes, answers that she is talking about him. She says that at first she was a little worried he is much more mature than her, but now she is happy because he treats her as an equal and speaks to her simply, just like her maid Rhea. Philia smiles and says she feels relieved he is not the type to boast about being a hero or flaunt his status, and Solon is a bit embarrassed and says that for him it is an honor that she thinks so, but still tries to object. Solon tries to tell her that he is not the great man she thinks he is, but Philia sharply interrupts him stop, and comes close, insisting that since he is now her master, he should drop formal words and speak to her simply. Solon is stunned by how sudden it is, but Philia does not stop. She looks away and adds that she really wants him to stop calling her Your Majesty as well. She looks back at him, smiling a little shyly, and says that she wants him to call her by her name Philia. Solon says that even if she asks that's too much all at once, he thinks to himself that he really can't just drop all formalities and talk to a royal person as if she were his old friend. Solon is completely overwhelmed by her request and quietly gasps when he realizes how serious she is. Philia literally bounced on the couch, begging Solon again and again to call her by her name, and Solon, clearly nervous, said that everything is already quite scary, so he can't just call her by her name without a reason. Philia leans closer and asks him to call her by her name even when there is no reason to talk. Solon is a little stunned by her energy and asks if she really likes it so much when he calls her by her name so often. Philia gives him a huge, happy smile and confidently confirms that yes, she really does. She explains why she is so happy. In her life, absolutely no one else calls her by her real name. Her words struck Solon. Suddenly something clicked in his head, and he began to understand. As a princess in her position, she is actually powerless and cut off inside the imperial palace. Solon thought to himself that usually no one would specifically try to get close to a princess who has no real power, while Philia, looking thoughtful, suggested that maybe she doesn't need him to address her formally at all, say, lady, when speaking. Philia excitedly asks Solon to try right now to call her simply by her name, without any honorifics. Solon begins to panic and begs to be given a break, it's too hard for him. Philia says a little disappointedly that it's a pity he won't do it, but quickly brightens up and adds that for now she will forgive him. Solon politely bows and tells Philia that he is sincerely grateful that she cares so much about him. Philia raised her eyes to him with a bright smile and says how nice it is to see him again, addressing him simply by name. Solon remains reserved and replies that the pleasure is entirely his. Suddenly realizing the time, Philia jumped up and rushed off. She must quickly change clothes before someone catches her. Solon was a little embarrassed and said he would leave the room to give her some space, but she quickly waved it off. It's okay, stay right where you are. The door closes, Solon stands there, clearly nervous, and begins to doubt whether it is good at all that he is in the room. While she changes at that very moment, someone knocks on the door. The door suddenly swung open, and Rhea, a maid wearing glasses, entered looking for the princess and asked if her highness was nearby. Rhea froze in place when she noticed Saul standing there. She looked him up and down and asked who he was. Solon calmly introduced himself. He is the new tutor of the princess, and Rhea only grimly, and without any enthusiasm, received this news. A haughty little smile slowly appeared on Rhea's face as she looked at him. She asked if he was really the new tutor, and added that he was a poor soul who took on this job. Solon, completely puzzled, repeated her words, wondering why she called him a poor soul. Rhea stepped back and said to him, "Pass the message to the princess when I return." Rhea, leaving, firmly asked him, passed to Philia that she needs to manage her maids much better. The door slammed, and Solon was left standing alone, exhausted from the whole conversation. He remembered the words of Professor Lucy and suddenly realized she was right. Here people clearly almost do not respect the princess. Just then he hears the door click open again, and he raises his head, looking with interest at who is returning. It's Philia, and she immediately apologizes for leaving him alone with that awkward situation. Solon waved it off as if to say, it's nothing serious, but she still thanks him and says that if Theodora had caught her, she would have been in serious trouble. Solon becomes a bit more serious and asks her if the person who was here earlier was really a maid. Philia tells him that Rhea is actually her only servant, and Solon, confused, asks if she really has only one person who takes care of her. Philia simply smiles sincerely and confirms, yes, she has very few employees. Solon begins to doubt himself, wondering if the way he asked was rude or insensitive. He cleared his throat to ease the tension, asked where the maid had gone, and added that he wanted to properly introduce himself since they would have to meet more than once. Solon starts to worry that his questions about her staff crossed a line, but Philia only asks if she said something strange that caused his reaction, and he immediately says no, not at all. He becomes embarrassed and tries to explain himself better, stumbling over words because he can't find how to say why her situation surprises him so much. Philia is about to say something else when a quiet clatter from the other end of the room draws their attention. Solon asked what that noise was, and Phileas looked closely and showed, it seems a letter has arrived. They approach and see an envelope lying in a small slot. Solon cannot believe that there really is a built-in mailbox in the room, and Philia confirms, it is definitely masculine. Solon picks up the envelope and hands it to her. She takes it and thanks him. Looking at the seal, Philia notes that for her to become a man is actually quite a rare thing, and Solon watches her closely, feeling that her mood has shifted slightly. She freezes for a moment, not looking away from the letter, so Solon calls her by name, asking if she is okay. Philia takes a deep breath and looks at him, finally deciding to open up and say what is really happening. She looks Solon straight in the eyes and tells the truth. Her maid is really missing right now, so she is completely alone. Solon seems struck. Philia's words hit him so hard that he can hardly comprehend the news. Philia explains, her maid is a good and serious person, but too unreliable and often messes things up, so she could not have just gone home to her family without saying a word. Solon listens carefully as Philia's face grows even gloomier. She finishes by pointing to a simple and cruel truth. The girl has disappeared. Philia looks down at the ground, appearing small and depressed as she confirms that her maid really left. She says that is why she had the feeling that something was wrong with the whole matter. She lowers her gaze to the letter they just found and begins to read what is written in it. The letter is a ransom note. It states that her maid Clarice has been taken hostage and issues a harsh ultimatum. If Philia wants the girl to survive, she must come and get her herself. The second Solon, when he hears the name Clarice, looks stunned. It is clear that this name means something to him, and he begins to noticeably tense up. To be sure, Solon asks Philia what that girl really looks like. Philia says that she is a small, sweet girl with flaxen hair, who is only slightly taller than her. Solon recalls the girl from the carriage and suddenly realizes the descriptions match perfectly. He is sure the kidnapped maid is exactly the same one he spoke to earlier. Philia notices that he is lost in thought, calls him by name to get his attention, and Solon instantly pretends as if nothing happened, but immediately says that they must stop wasting time and call the guards at once. Philia is completely stunned at that moment when Solon suggests calling the guards. She tells him to wait and shouts that these guards are useless, and she herself looks completely panicked at the very thought of informing the palace guards. Solon was suddenly shocked by her sudden outburst of words, and he could not believe his ears. Solon asks her why she is so against this idea, and then he suddenly realizes he remembers that the ransom letter had neither an address nor a name. The realization weighs like a stone. The letter was brought directly to her room, and no one opened it, so the kidnapper must be someone from the imperial palace staff. Philia tightly grips her sleeve and confesses. She cannot trust anyone in the palace. She has no idea who is truly an ally and who is an enemy. She looks broken as she explains that Clarice was the only person she could really trust. Solon understands that the kidnappers are clearly targeting Philia herself, and although he knows that technically refusing the maid could protect the princess, he does not dare to suggest it. Solon puts on a gentle smile and asks Philia if she thinks she can trust him. Philia simply froze. Looking at him, the question completely embarrassed her. Solon knows what it looks like and says that he is just a guy she met for the first time today. Philia looked at Solon and said that since she personally invited him to be her mentor, she cannot but trust him, and Solon noticeably sighed with relief and said he was glad to hear that. Solon says to her, "Leave everything to me until the end of the day." Philia looks at him and quietly utters his name, feeling a sense of security envelop her. She presses her hand to her chest and asks if he can really save her and safely return Clarice. Solon bows deeply, placing his hand on his heart, and tells her that he came to this palace to serve both as her mentor and as a subject. He explains that a subject must protect their lord and a mentor must guide their student. Solon sees that she is upset and asks her not to look so sad. He says he is sure Clarice would say the same if she were here. Philia gathers herself for a moment, nods firmly, and now looks much more determined than before. Now that they have finally understood each other, Solon says they need to start preparing as soon as possible, and Philia instantly agrees. Philia notes that her dress is too bright and will attract attention, so she decides to change into her uniform. Solon nods, and she, heading to the door, adds that she still has to check one thing. As she was leaving, Solon suddenly remembered something important and called her. Philia stopped and asked what happened. Solon looks at her seriously and asks if she has any idea why someone targeted her at all. Philia lowers her eyes, her hand trembles on her chest. She confesses that she has an idea why she was chosen, but hesitates. She cannot find the right words to explain it. Solon felt her hesitation and understood that she was unable to talk about the details, so he immediately intervened and said that she did not need to say anything more. He says that the most important thing now is to help her. It does not matter for what reasons the attack happened. He even apologizes for poking his nose into her personal affairs, and Philia, clutching the edge of her skirt, quietly thanks him for such understanding. As soon as Philia goes out to change clothes, Solon sighs heavily, stands alone in the room, and thinks about how his simple job as a tutor turned into a complete mess. Despite the tension, his features sharpen. He knows exactly what is at stake and repeats to himself, defeat is not an option. He begins to weigh the options for help. He would like to call someone, but Professor Lucy is not in the capital today, and he knows for sure the Night Order must not be involved. Solon sits on the sofa and thoughtfully considers his plan. He knows that the result of the rescue mission will depend on how many enemies he will have to face at once. He examines the map of the meeting place and notices that there is a wide view from here, so because of the location he thinks they are unlikely to come in a large group. For a moment he buried his head in his hands and cannot believe how crazy his very first working day is turning out to be. Alone in the quiet office, Solon takes a deep breath to calm his nerves and tells himself, time to focus and stay concentrated on what will happen next. Philia looks down, clutches her hand over her heart, and apologizes to Solon for the trouble she caused. Solon remains professional and directly asks her if she has any suspicion at all why these people are after her. Philia looks completely broken and begins to explain that it is probably because of who she is, but she does not dare to finish her thought. She takes a trembling breath to calm down, and Solon gently calls her by name, asking if she is okay. They sneak up to the meeting place in a dark alley, and Solon quietly says that it is just around the next corner, suggesting they split up now so they won't be noticed. Philia is clearly nervous about all this, but quietly nods to him as if to say, I understand the plan. Noticing her tension, Solon looks at her and asks if she is scared of what is about to happen. Philia pretends to be brave, insisting that she is no longer a child and is not afraid at all. Although she pretends to be brave, Solon feels her hand trembling as it grips his sleeve, and this clearly reveals her true feelings. Solon smiles at her reassuringly and says it's time to go. He promises that they will bring back Clarice, no matter what. Philia is noticeably sweating and tense to the limit, preparing to meet the bandits. At 2 a.m. she goes alone to the meeting place, repeating the plan in her head. Solon will stay in the shadows and draw out the conversation to find out exactly how many people are there, and she knows she must remain calm and extract information without pushing the kidnappers to a breakdown. She takes a deep breath and tries to convince herself that everything will be fine. The further she goes into the alley, the more often she looks back at Solon. She does not lose faith that if something goes wrong, he will definitely be nearby to save her. Suddenly, the darkness was pierced by a voice. Good evening, princess, and Philia jumped up, completely frozen by this unexpected greeting. She hears footsteps. She instantly looks back over her shoulder towards the noise. She peers intently into the dark doorway nearby, waiting to see who will come out to meet her. A figure emerges from the shadow and, smiling, says that they never thought the princess would come here alone. The woman with a smirk admits that perhaps she underestimated the princess's determination a little. Theodora fully steps into the light, two men standing on either side of her. She tells Philia that although her appearance is unexpected, it actually changes nothing. What is meant to happen will happen anyway. Solon's eyes widened as he got a good look at the person standing before Philia. He immediately recognized her. Suddenly it becomes clear to him. Philia really had something to fear, and his suspicions are confirmed. Behind all this stands a person from the imperial palace. Philia directly throws in Theodora's face that she was the one who left that threatening letter. Theodora doesn't even try to hide it. She simply says that it would be much easier for everyone if the princess just, like a normal person, called the guards. Ignoring the attitude, Philia puts Claris first and anxiously asks if the maid is all right. Theodora only smirked and told her that the girl didn't have a scratch, then indifferently stated that they are actually not villains. She goes on to call Claris a rather useless servant, but insists there is no reason to hurt her for no reason. Behind them, Claris is seen tied to a chair and completely broken in spirit. Theodora stands between her two guards and tells Philia that their true goal is not just to hurt people or kidnap for no reason. She drops a real bombshell. Their only desire is for such a disgusting creature as the princess to simply disappear from the face of the earth. Standing in the shadows, Solon is completely confused. He cannot understand why Theodora called Philia disgusting and what she meant by that. Philia just stands, looking at the floor in shock. She is completely stunned by the pure hatred coming from a person she knows. Solon watches Philia from his hiding place and sees. She behaves very strangely, trembling and looking as if she is about to break down. Theodora, with an ironic smile, says Princess Philia with disgust and tells the girl that just this address gives her goosebumps. She does not stop. She says she is disappointed with the decisions of the imperial family and claims that many people in the palace already know about the tainted blood that Philia carries. Phileas begins to lose control, crying and trying to prove that it is not true, defending his father, saying that the emperor would never do such a thing, but barely manages to say the words. Theodora instantly cuts her off, loudly shouting no, and looks as if she is enjoying every second of Philia's suffering. Philia begs her to be quiet and just stay silent, while she herself, while pleading, secretly fears that Solon will hear everything and learn her secret. She is in panic because she thinks that if Solon finds out the truth, she will lose any chance to save Claris for herself. This is the absolute worst-case scenario. Theodora just laughed and said there is nothing to be so afraid of, casually adding that everyone standing in the room now already knows the secret. Philia froze in shock when Theodora aloud uttered what everyone only whispered, that she was actually the daughter of a demon. Philia seems to want to run away, and Theodora asks if she finally understands why people want to harm her. Philia looks at the floor, completely broken, quietly admits that there is a grain of truth in the rumors, but it is clearly hard for her to say it aloud. Hiding nearby, Solon finally puts all the pieces together and realizes this secret demonic blood is exactly what Philia so desperately tried to hide from everyone. Theodora does not hold back. She mocks the fact that the emperor cannot control himself and laughs at the fact that he made a demon slave pregnant, thus Philia appeared. She unleashes a verbal attack, saying that the imperial family is just trying to cover up their mess, and adds, if the secret really mattered to them, they would have killed Philia as soon as she was born. Theodora leaned closer with a malicious look and asked Philia if she does not think it makes sense. The words hit Philia painfully. She grabbed her chest and tries to cope with the pain from the fact that her existence is spoken of as if it were a mistake. Philia manages to hold back and, keeping herself together, asks Theodora what her real plan is, says that if she just wanted to kill her, she would not have bothered and would not have brought her to this very place. Theodora flashed a bright, anxious smile and told Philia not to worry. She clarified that she does not intend to give her a quick or easy death. Philia froze in shock, trying to understand what Theodora meant when she said it would not be easy. Theodora reveals her vile plan. She will start by telling the whole world that the demon's daughter was hiding in the royal family, wants everyone to remember demons are enemies, and when she makes Philia's life a public nightmare, she will kill her, but only after tormenting her for a long and cruel time. Theodora thinks this is the best way to wake up the public, who, in her opinion, have recently become too soft on demons and beast people, and Philia can hardly believe her ears. Finally, she realizes. Theodora belongs to a group called the Union of Righteous Men. Theodora got fired up, confirmed that she is with them, rolled up her sleeve and proudly showed a tattoo, a skull with a cross on the forearm, and said that, in her opinion, every single pure-blooded person must be a member of the Union. She launched into a vicious tirade, calling Philia some kind of creature that is neither human nor demon. Theodora felt disgusted at the very thought of half-bloods, saying they appear everywhere and only do one thing: give birth to new children. Theodora loses her head, shouts that the mere thought that people like Philia exist makes her feel like she is about to go insane. Philia froze for a moment in silence, her hand trembling as it clenched the fabric of her dress. She raised her eyes and quietly asked Theodora. Philia asks her why she hates demons so much. Theodora simply looks back with an empty, eerie gaze and asks if the answer isn't obvious. Theodora coldly, without any pity, says, simply because they are disgusting. She leans in close, eyes wide open and burning, and asks Philia if she really thinks any other reason is needed besides that. The cold, indifferent hatred in Theodora's voice completely shakes Philia. She stands frozen, unable even to breathe as the weight of the situation overwhelms her. One of Theodora's people approaches her, addresses her respectfully, and asks for the next order. Theodora doesn't even look at him, simply says no, and decides to take matters into her own hands. Theodora shouts it to Philia, mockingly calling her the devil's daughter, and at the same time pulls out a thin white wand, preparing to finish the job with her magic. One of the guards suddenly flinched at the noise behind, while Theodora remained cold and focused, telling Philia that it would put her to sleep a little. The tattoo on Theodora's arm emerges as she raises her magic wand. It flashes with a sharp, crackling light, and Theodora asks Philia to calm down, assuring her that the spell will not harm her at all. Theodora shouts that today is the end, releases a powerful burst of magic, and for a moment it seems to Philia that this is the end. She stands there in shock. The light fades and Philia slowly blinks, opening her eyes. She is still alive but completely confused. How did she survive the explosion? Suddenly Solon appears nearby on his knees, protecting Philia with his hand. He tells Theodora that everything has changed now, 3 against 1, and asks what she intends to do. Solon looked down at Philia with a reassuring smile. He spoke softly to her, making sure she was not injured after everything that had just happened. Philia barely managed to say that she was okay, and behind her on the ground lay all of Theodora's people unconscious. Theodora herself stood rooted, looking at Solon and trying to understand who he really was. Finally, it dawned on Theodora. She recognized him, the same tutor from the morning, and completely confused, asked why he had appeared here now. Theodora could not comprehend what was happening, and asked Solon why the hell he was protecting the devil's daughter. Philia just remained silent, completely shocked by the question. Solon did not hesitate for a second. He told Theodora that he was doing it because he was Philia's tutor. Philia looked up at him, suddenly struck by how confident he sounded. He also said that besides being her teacher, he was Solon, the magical swordsman, and his creed was to stand on the side of the weak and overthrow the strong. Theodora just stared at him, repeating his name as if trying to recall who he was. The men around her began to whisper because they recognized him as the same Solon from the legends, and immediately spoke about his connection with Sophia and the Sacred Knights, while Theodora only exhaled coldly, completely unimpressed. She asks why this should concern her, honestly says that in fact it is even better this way. Apparently, she is glad that he can also be removed. Solon does not back down and tells her, no matter what anyone says about him, he will do only what he considers right. Moving further, Solon lowers his gaze down and calls Philia to attract her attention. He tells her to lift her head and stand proudly. He wants her to stop looking so broken. Even though her legs tremble wildly, Solon emphasizes, she came here knowing exactly how dangerous it is, only to help Clarice, and tells her that this makes her incredibly brave. Solon finishes by saying that he is truly glad to serve someone like her. Hearing this, Philia is completely overwhelmed with emotion. She seems about to cry from relief. Philia looks completely shattered as she apologizes to Solon. She admits that she kept silent about people calling her the devil's daughter, but Solon immediately stops her and says there is no need to apologize. He throws her a confident look and says that no matter what her title is, it does not change the fact that she is his student. Hearing this, a smile finally appears on Philia's face, and she thanks him, thinking that he has not changed at all. Moving forward, Philia does not retreat. She stands her ground and is more determined than ever. She calls Solon and tells him to bring her victory, adding that she will continue to give him all her trust. Solon simply gave a sharp, confident smile. The realization hits him as her teacher. He really needs to get to work and become a worthy example for her. Solon turned to the threat and promised Philia that he would definitely bring her victory, adding, "Just watch, I will now give exactly the ending you want to see." On the other hand, Theodora's guys are just laughing, clearly not taking him seriously, preparing to move forward. Theodora begins to mock him, calls him a commoner pretending to be a knight and clearly out of his mind, and says she will make him seriously regret siding with the devil. Huge tongues of flame burst out as Theodora and her guards cast their spells, and she shouted at them to hurry up and kill Solon so they could capture the girl. Philia, clearly worried, calls Solon, but he just moves forward and calmly says, "Leave everything to me." As a huge wall of fire approached, Solon swung his blade and cut through the magic. The flames instantly dispersed. The guards lose their heads, and one of them shouts in disbelief that he really cut through the fire, while another, realizing they are in trouble, says it's getting worse. Solon looked at the panicked guard and calmly said that deflecting such a blow is an easy task even for him. They hadn't even reacted yet when Solon closed the distance and began knocking them down. The first guard took a hit and only groaned. Solon doesn't stop for a moment, delivers a powerful blow, and a shockwave spreads across the area from it. The guards sharply fell to the ground, and Theodora froze in place. She can't believe her elite team was knocked out so quickly. One of the guards, still conscious, lies on the ground thinking to himself, It can't be that we lost in an instant in despair. He repeats that the mission can't be failed like this. Determined to act, the guard tightly grips his weapon and decides, if it has come to this, he will make one last desperate dash. Moving on, Solon again turns his gaze to Theodora and tells her that it's time to finish this, and it clearly caught her by surprise. Theodora completely loses her mind. Realizing the mission is over and she will be captured anyway, she decides to take Philia with her and lunges forward with a dagger, shouting that at least she will manage to kill the demon girl before the end. Philia found herself in the very heart of chaos, frozen in place as a blinding flash unfolded around her. She only let out a sharp scream, utterly frightened, while the attack flew straight at her. Before Theodora could do anything, Solon instantly stopped her. He was behind her, locked her in a hold, and casually asked if her little tantrum was finally over. Theodora was completely shocked at how quickly he acted. When the dust settled, Solon stood looking at the weapon Theodora had used. Pieces began to fall into place in his mind. The Righteous Union. He knew it was an extremist group that fiercely hated demons and half-humans, and that was why they targeted the princess. Looking at the scene, Solon suddenly realizes how bad everything is. He is shocked that a member of such a group could so easily infiltrate the imperial palace, and it dawns on him that Philia is never truly safe, neither at home nor away. Solon's expression becomes serious as he looks at the dagger, and he admits to himself. He thought this would be a simple tutor job, but now he understands to keep the princess alive, he will have to completely change his mindset. Continuing, Solon again turns his attention to Philia and calls her by name, and the sudden sound of his voice makes the princess jump. She is clearly still on edge after everything that just happened. Solon approaches her, and in the background, elite guards are tied up and piled in a heap. He calmly asks if she is injured anywhere, and Philia barely finds her voice to answer. Philia clutches her dress and looks at the floor, still trembling a little, quietly replies that she is fine and not hurt. Although she says she is fine, Philia raises a worried look at Solon, and seeing how easily and effortlessly he survived that life-or-death situation, asks if he was not scared at all. Solon suddenly froze when Philia abruptly stretched out her hand and grabbed the edge of his cloak. She lowered her gaze, a quiet confirmation that she was finally listening to him. Holding on tightly, Philia finally allows herself to relax. She admits to Solon that it was all terrifying, and again repeats how scared she was. Solon gives her a soft, understanding smile. He does not judge her, simply agrees and says he is sure it was really hard for her to cope. To make her feel better, Solon confesses himself. He places his hand on hers and honestly says that he is still afraid to fight. Philia looked up at him in complete shock. She could not believe that such a strong person could feel that way. She asks if he really is afraid too, and he says, "Of course I am afraid." He looks her in the eyes and says that everyone is afraid, so she does not need to force herself to be strong or pretend that everything is fine when it is not. Philia asks if she can really be that vulnerable, and Solon gently assures her that she can. Then he changes the subject and asks once more if she is hurt anywhere. Suddenly, Philia leans in so close that Solon is completely stunned and begins to blush and stammers, saying her name, utterly confused by her closeness. Philia embraced him, and finally a few tears of relief shone in her eyes. She smiled and said she really wants to grow up just like him. She says that even if she is scared, she wants to become strong enough to fight for those she loves. She is tired of being a girl who just trembles and does nothing, and since he first started teaching her magic, she has dreamed of becoming a protector like him. Solon is clearly moved by Philia's words, and looking at her, he cannot help but think, she is only 14, and she has already found the determination that many adults never manage to find. Philia clung tightly to him, and finally through tears a smile broke through. She thanks him for everything, and says how much she appreciates that he protected her. Solon remains modest and says to her, "You're welcome," but a quiet moment is suddenly interrupted by the tapping of a boot on the ground nearby. A familiar chuckle is heard, and a close-up shows a very mischievous smile. Someone is watching them from the shadows. And then Clara stands and laughs to herself, teasing them, saying that the princess and Solon are much braver than she expected. The romantic atmosphere instantly shatters. Philia jumps back, her face burning with a bright blush. She stammers, says Claris's name, and tries to pretend nothing happened. Claris does not let the teasing drag on. She runs up to them, sharply changes the subject, and asks Philia if she really feels okay walking like this after everything that happened. Philia worries more about Claris, asks about the injury, and begins to blame herself for what happened, but Claris just smiles broadly and says she is fine because being strong is her best trait. Finally, relief washed over Philia, and she cried again, but this time from happiness. She's simply glad that her friend is safe and sound. Their small meeting was cut short when another voice called the princess's name from afar, and both girls froze suddenly. Solon looks at the crying Philia and quietly says that she will become stronger. At least today, she saved Claris. Philia responded loudly and decisively, and Solon felt that his very first day as a royal mentor had finally come to an end. The consequences of the chaos began. Theodore and the rest of the kidnapper gang were detained along with over 100 guards connected to the so-called Justice Union, and although this is a high-profile arrest, the newspapers do not write about it. This whole dirty affair is quietly swept under closed doors so that no one learns about Philia's birth. But in reality, this is not done for her sake, but so that the emperor does not lose his position and authority. Later, Solon sits alone at the table in silence. He thinks about how finally, at least for some time, everything has calmed down. He recalls the entire fight and suddenly realizes, if Philia had not rushed forward and won him time, he would never have reached Clarice and saved her. In the memory from the carriage, Clarice asks David what is happening, but Solon quickly gestures for her to be quiet so as not to ruin their plan. Solon thinks about Philia's courage. Although she is a princess, she is only 14 and was definitely terribly scared, so he is impressed by how much she trusted him and how focused she was in carrying out her part of the plan. He is glad that this time he was able to protect both girls, but looking out the window, he feels pressure and doubts. Will he really be able to keep them safe going forward? He remembers how Professor Lucy said he would make a wonderful teacher for the princess. Sitting there, suddenly a thought flashed through his mind, and he froze, pondering. Solon recalls his old mentor and cannot get rid of the thought. Does Professor Lucy really know the secret surrounding Philia's birth? He begins to wonder how they even met. While he is lost in thought, Clarice suddenly calls his name to get his attention. Solon looks at her as she approaches with a broad smile, says he looks exhausted after a sleepless night, and offers to make him some tea to help him relax. Solon thanks her and says that Philia has already prepared a few things for him, so he is fine, then asks if the princess is taking a break. Clarice says that Philia is now hidden in the bedroom and is sleeping soundly. It turned out that the tea was made by after Philia. They talked a little, and then she simply fell asleep from exhaustion. Solon noticed that she had been working herself to the bone all night and was probably completely worn out after those long interrogations by the officials. Feeling that she was resting, Solon felt much easier, and he quietly sighed with relief. Clarice looked at the sleeping princess and said that Philia usually has trouble falling asleep, so she sincerely rejoices seeing that she is finally resting. Clarice thinks that the princess was finally able to relax because she felt safe. Solon agrees and says that it is definitely because Clarice returned unharmed. Clarice just giggles and tells him that this is not at all what he meant, and Solon stands there, completely confused and has no idea what he is missing. Clarice tells Solon that the princess was finally able to relax and fall asleep only because he is here with them, and Solon, who was sitting by the window, suddenly froze in surprise. Clarice becomes a little serious, lowers her eyes, and admits that she realized she is not strong enough to protect Princess Philia when it becomes dangerous. It hurts her. She says that during the recent trouble she felt like just a burden. She brightened up a bit and enthusiastically recalled how yesterday she was stunned first of all, because she never expected David to appear and save them. Solon starts sweating and feels uncomfortable, because she still does not suspect that David was actually him in a mask. Solon tries to apologize for the whole situation, cries that he was just kicked out of his old group, and while people were watching, he had to hide his identity, but Clarice does not listen to this and says not to apologize because she is just happy to have had the chance to meet him. Clara thinks about his past and honestly says it's strange that he was ever kicked out if he is so strong, and asks if the leaders of his old group were just jealous of his talent. Solon just laughed and assured her that this is definitely not the case, but Clara still looked a little skeptical about his modest answer. Solon reflects on how top adventure groups work. Unlike the army, in these small teams everyone must be a narrow specialist at an elite level, and if someone does not pull their weight they are cut off. It's part of the deal. He clearly remembers the words of Creon and Sophia when they let him. Gothi admitted that they were actually afraid he might die because he was no longer at their level. His mind goes even further back to those first days when the three of them had just formed their group, and he clearly remembers how one day they allowed a young girl to join, even though she didn't have the necessary skills. This experience turned everything upside down for them. They swore to each other never to make such a mistake again, and since then the three of them remained incredibly strict about the group's requirements. Solon pauses for a moment in his memories and with a heavy heart realizes, if he were in the place of the former party leaders, he probably would have done the same, let go of the one who did not meet the elite standards. As soon as the mood became heavy, Clara intervened and cut through his thoughts. Solon flinched slightly and looked at her while she changed the subject. She tells him that even if the senior knights do not see value in him, it does not matter to her. She and Princess Philia consider him a hero who saved their lives when everything seemed hopeless. With a big smile, she sincerely thanks him. She makes him understand. For her, it means a lot he came to save her twice. Solon turns the conversation around and says that actually he is the one who should be thankful. This catches Clarice by surprise. She is confused and blushes, wondering why he is thanking her. Seeing her reaction, Solon smiles. He understands that he was right, and there is no longer any point in sitting and feeling insecure about his place. He stands up, extends his hand to her, and says that from now on they are colleagues. He looks forward to working together and asks her to look after him. Clarice does not hesitate for a second. She gladly agrees and takes his hand, sealing their new partnership with a firm handshake. Watching her blush and behave so shyly, Solon suddenly realized he needs to become stronger not only for himself but to protect those who truly trust him. Returning to business, Clarice offers to give him a tour of the premises and show how everything works here, and Solon sincerely says that he really appreciates her help. Clarice took the initiative into her own hands and, leading the way, told Solon to rely on her. Solon followed her, full of curiosity and ready to see the rest of the place. In the next scene, the newspaper Daily Discourse explodes with heavy news. A revolutionary group called the July Party has killed the Minister of Internal Affairs, as if it were a protest against the crackdown on civilians carried out by the Imperial Army 2 years ago. Details are still being clarified. Suddenly, a memory of little Philia surfaces. She stands alone, and the voices around treat her like trash, shouting, "Stop dawdling," calling her a useless princess, and even asking if she wants to be hit again, while the poor girl just keeps apologizing continuously. Philia looks completely broken. She constantly thinks about how much everyone hates her, and is sure it is because she is the daughter of the devil. She walks down a long, empty corridor, clinging to a tiny thread of hope, whispering to herself that if only she could see her father, maybe everything would change and everyone would finally accept her. Later, someone seated her in a large chair and ordered her to stay put. Philia only responded quietly and immediately did exactly as she was told. She looks around and sees her father, the emperor, but he is not alone. He sits on the throne and gently treats some other young girl, while Philia just watches from the shadows and quietly whispers to her father. It hurts to see the emperor behave like a loving father with someone else. Philia looks away, thinking how lucky that other girl is. As she walks away, she wishes so much that she too would be met with the same warmth. But just as she started moving, someone shouted at her, "Stop right here." Philia finally gathers courage and calls to her father, who is sitting on the throne with another girl. The emperor is clearly stunned by this unexpected call. She is very nervous, her cheeks burning. She struggles to find words to speak to him. She once again barely audibly calls him dad, but he just sits silently, his face hidden in shadows. The silence is broken by the emperor's cold question, "Who is she anyway?" and the shock that he does not recognize her strikes the heart. Philia freezes, making no sound, when one of the courtiers near the throne begins to explain to the emperor who she is. The courtier leans so close to the emperor's ear and whispers details about his daughter, as if she were just a random stranger. Hearing the explanation, the emperor responded contemptuously, behaving as if even noticing her was a waste of his time. Philia remains standing completely shattered. With wide-open eyes, she realizes that her own father is completely indifferent to her. The servant tells the emperor that it is time to move on. He just nods and walks away, and Philia turns away completely broken. She reaches out her hand, watches his back disappear into the distance, begs him to wait, and does not understand why she is being treated this way. Philia wakes up in her bed and realizes the cold alienation of her father was just a dream. Just then Clarice opens the door and enters, cheerfully greeting Philia, "Good morning." Approaching the bed, Clarice asks Philia if she managed to sleep well. Philia gets up with a wide smile, says that she did, and then happily wishes Clarice good morning. The scene shifts to the eastern part of the empire, where the view from above falls on the bustling city streets. In the city towers the headquarters of the Knights of St. Sophia, distinguished by a large flag with a coat of arms proudly waving. Inside the building, tension hangs in the air. Someone slammed their palm on the table and complains that all the blame for what is happening is being placed on them alone. It turns out this is Alt, the temporary deputy captain of the Knights, and she is furiously angry. A boy named Notaro watches with a sly smile, thinking about how everyone has been gossiping since Crayon left, and how funny it is that they are so heavily criticized just because the Ruins investigation did not go quite well. Alt completely loses her temper. The idea of Solon returning to the group is simply ridiculous to her, and she will not allow it. A knock on the door broke the silence in the room and caught Alt by surprise. Alt turns to the door and asks, "Who is there?" And from the other side, a voice replies that it is her sister. Recognizing Flora's voice, Alt relaxed a little and told her she could come in. She enters the room, and Flora immediately recalls the meeting that just took place. Flora, an astrologer and one of the leading knights of the Order of St. Sophia, looks anxiously at her sister and asks, "Are you all right?" Alt stands with her back to her sister and looks at the bookshelf, insists that she is fine, and asks if that is exactly why Flora came. Flora explains that she is actually worried. She heard Tara say that Solon should be called back to the group again. Alt calms her down, says not to worry. The proposal has already been rejected, and next time she will not allow anything to go wrong. Flora just nods lightly in response. After a moment, Flora asks if Alt really intends to send another reconnaissance group back to those ruins. Alt confirmed the plan and said that she definitely cannot allow a repeat of the previous disaster, so this time she will make sure to pick much better people. Alt is clearly hurt by her sister's tone and, unable to hold back, tells Flora that she is a bit too harsh. Alt turns around and asks if she really said something wrong, while Flora stands in the doorway, hesitating to bring it up further. Alt hurriedly looks for an excuse. She says she did not want those people to die. They were just much weaker than she expected, so she could hardly do anything. Flora is silent and watches as Alt decisively decides to simply take better people for the next attempt. Flora tries to speak again, and Alt glances at her side. What do you want now? Flora timidly asks if next time they could choose another, simpler place for the expedition, instead of returning to those ruins again. Alt immediately rejects this idea. She says she is not going to lower the difficulty, and Flora is shocked, asking why she is so stubborn. Alt explains if she plays too cautiously, people like Notaris will only find more reasons to smear her, and she, as the temporary deputy captain, cannot afford to look like she is losing her nerve. Flora was stunned by shock. Her sister is putting so much pressure on herself that Flora is overwhelmed and tries to object. Alt abruptly interrupts her and becomes detached, reminding Flora that 2 years have passed since they graduated from the School of Magic, hinting that there is no more time for safe games. Alt explains that they need to take revenge on those at home who mocked them for being twins, and for this, she says, they need to do something so grandiose that everyone will have no choice but to praise them, so a high-difficulty ruin clearance is mandatory. Flora looks very tense and says she understands the logic, but clearly disagrees with how dangerous it is. Alt simply tells her, relax, there's no need to worry so much. Flora froze, confused for a moment, while Alt moves toward the window. Alt returns with a cheeky smile and says that they are both much stronger than Solon ever was. Then she adds that Cryon actually makes their next step much easier. Flora looks puzzled and asks what she means by things being convenient. Alt says it will be a huge surprise, but for now must remain a secret from the rest of the group. Flora simply responds with a barely noticeable nod. Alt leaned so close to Flora's ear and quietly whispered the details of the plan. Flora is shocked by what she heard. Her face shows that she cannot believe her sister has planned such a thing. Alt steps back feeling great and asks Flora, isn't this a wonderful plan? Flora just stands, watches her leave, and has never been so worried about her sister. Alt is fully focused on the next ruin conquest and tells herself that this time she will make it a complete success. She's determined to show much better results than Solon ever had. She feels that before they were stuck because Solon was holding them back, but now they can finally tackle high-level ruins they deserve. For her, this is only the first step, so she leaves no room for mistakes. She is completely sure, as soon as she succeeds, Sophia will finally give her the praise she has longed for so much. In her head, Solon was just an annoying obstacle. She is sure that Sophia will soon understand. Only Alt truly should be by her side. Alt says that she is actually looking forward to the challenge and promises that everything will work out. Meanwhile, the girl mage from the group stands behind and watches closely. She is ready for anything to win, no matter what methods she has to use. Meanwhile, Notara walks through the building. The notary looked at the results of the recent vote, 4-4-6 against, and 2 who abstained. With such numbers, rejection was practically inevitable. Notary, leader, and summoner of the Knights of St. Sophia pauses for a moment to think. He says it was worth it at least to see that irritated expression on Alt's face for the first time in a long while, and next to him Alt herself, who looks as if she is about to explode with anger. The notary walks away, laughing to himself, while another person stands in the corridor wondering what is so funny here. Even despite everything that is happening, there is a big but in this situation that needs to be resolved. The notary anxiously thinks that Alt really does not understand how strong or weak her people are, and he is sure that if she continues to rule this way, even more people will simply perish. He knows how it is with those aristocratic commanders like Alt. They are so self-absorbed that they don't trust any outside advice, and everyone knows that Alt is so stubborn that she doesn't even consult with her twin sister Flora. But for Notaris, the real trouble is Cryon. He knows that Cryon sees very clearly how terribly Alt ruins everything, but he just sits aside and allows disasters to happen. The Knights of St. Sophia became famous for putting the lives of their people above all else. That's exactly why the public loves them. Except for one old case when they had only 3, they maintained a perfect record, 0 casualties. Cryon was once the most ardent supporter of that policy, so it's strange to hear that Taras is silent, not a word about how the team was destroyed under Alt's command. When Solon was expelled, Alt was promoted to deputy captain, and Cryon seemed to hand her the keys to the kingdom. Notaris also begins to feel uneasy because Cryon has hardly appeared at headquarters lately. Turns out that Solon, Cryon, and Sophia were the three who founded the order, and since Solon was the eldest, he was the one who protected them in those early days and did everything to ensure their survival. The bond between those three was supposed to be unbreakable, and for a long time, no matter how much Alt complained or tried to get Solon demoted or expelled, Cryon and Sophia didn't even pay attention to her. But for some reason, everything changed, and the thread that held them together finally broke. Turned out that it was Cryon who insisted on expelling Solon during the meeting, and he was the one who ensured that the expulsion issue was actually passed. Notaris stands pondering the situation. He knows well that Solon has no spectacular combat abilities, but that's not the main thing. Solon's true strength lies in his tactical genius and in being a reliable support, not the main fighter. The fact is, if they continue to venture into those high-level ruins, the risk of people dying will only increase. Since the knights now value only brute force, it was only a matter of time before Solon was finally stripped of the deputy captain rank. Notaris shrugged and decided that there was no point in worrying about it anymore. Leaving, he thinks that Cryon probably has some hidden motive in all this. He realizes that the only thing he can do is try to control Alt and not let her make the situation worse. He tells himself, behave like a professional former soldier for now, keep silent and follow orders. But deep in his soul, he still worries where this order leads. He really hopes that Sophia will at least intervene and rein in Alt with the necessary criticism to keep her in check. Meanwhile, all eyes turn to the huge imperial palace. Solon is already settling into his new life, reviewing the equipment and asking if this is the clothing he needs to wear for the ceremony tomorrow. Rhea tells Philia that the dress fits her perfectly, and Philia beams with joy, asking if she really looks cute in it. Rhea quickly confirms this. Philia returns to Solon, seeking his thoughts on the outfit, and explains that she will wear it to the ceremony tomorrow. Rhea looks over the dress one more time for the last time, whether it pinches anywhere, whether it is uncomfortable, offering to adjust it by tomorrow. Philia smiles and says that everything is fine, no need to worry. Solon notes that since that last meeting, Philia has hardly grown, so she seems almost ready to go to the ceremony. Philia asks if he really sees it that way. Before leaving, Rhea asks them to let her know immediately if they need anything else, says she is going to help Professor Lucy, and Solon replies with a smile that it sounds good. As soon as they are alone, Philia cannot bear it and sharply asks Solon, exactly when do you mean, saying that you have seen me before. Solon recounts that this happened about 6 months ago, during the graduation ceremony of the Magic Academy, and Philia pauses for a moment, then says she understands. Philia suddenly realized that members of the imperial family were actually at that graduation ceremony. Reviewing that memory, she sees Sophia, the one who gave the farewell speech and was the main star of the day, so proud of herself, and Philia admits that she hardly remembers anything else from that ceremony. Solon begins to feel slight anxiety. Recalling that day, he feels like he might be forgetting something very important. The door opened and Clarissa told Professor Lucy that she looked simply incredibly beautiful. Lucy thanked her for the compliment. Then Lucy called Solon to get his attention, and he looked around to see what she wanted. Lucy changed into a black evening dress and asks Solon what he thinks of her appearance. Solon tells her that the dress is nice and seems to suit her well, while Lucy looks a bit disappointed and asks him if that is really all he has to say. She says she feels that his compliment is not heartfelt. Solon denies it, but honestly admits that he is lost because he does not know where to look because of the dress. This time Lucy decides to give him a break, and Solon only quietly smiles awkwardly in response. Just then Philia, blushing, blurts out whether her outfit accidentally looks better on her. Lucy is shocked by the sudden competition. Solon starts sweating and tells them that they simply cannot be compared. Philia's voice sounds disappointed, and Lucy just gives her a blank look. Rhea intervened and advised Philia to change clothes before the dress got wrinkled. Solon quickly agreed that it was a good idea. Rhea leads ahead, and Solon finally exhales, deeply relieved to have gotten out of that awkward situation. Solon understands that since the kidnapping from Claris, Princess Philia has become very attached to him, and he finds it hard to comprehend. He looks a bit tense due to the sudden change in their relationship. He notices that Philia is now much more relaxed. As Claris said, she beams with a smile and is clearly happy, but Solon cannot shake off his anxiety, whether he should worry about how close she's been getting to him lately. Sitting next to her, Solon reflects on how difficult it is to deal with girls in their awkward teenage years, and the silence is broken by Lucy, who looks at him and asks if he plans to wear formal clothes for tomorrow's events. Solon tells her without explaining that he will stick to his usual gear because he is used to it on guard. Lucy is a bit disappointed and says that it is a real shame. The conversation took a different turn when Notaris threw in. While Philia will have her ceremony, tomorrow is also the inauguration of the new prime minister. Lucy utters the name Strass and gets a little upset, saying she just hopes that all of this does not turn out to be a complete disappointment. Solon agrees with her and adds that he really wants them to overcome the hunger in the West as soon as possible. He looks quite serious because of the political situation. Lucy just sighs and says he is right, and the two of them sit on the couch in silence for a while, just looking out the window and thinking about everything ahead. Suddenly Solon realizes he forgot to ask something. He abruptly interrupts and tells Professor Lucy that something just came to his mind. He asks her when she actually first met Princess Philia. Lucy looks quite surprised. She gives him a curious look and prepares to answer. Solon listens, and Professor Lucy notes that he actually has not yet raised this issue before Princess Philia. Lucy settles on the sofa and begins to talk about family ties, revealing that her aunt is actually Philia's mother. A somewhat knowing expression appears on her face, and she explains that all this is actually just a formal arrangement. Solon says he assumed she already knew about the princess's blood, and Lucy quickly confirms she was right. Then Lucy explained that it was actually Philia who asked her to keep this a secret. She assured the girl that Solon is not the type to treat someone differently because of their status, but the princess was still worried. Lucy looks Solon straight in the eyes and asks directly if he feels that something has changed now that he knows the truth. Solon recalls how Philia is always so happy when she sees him waving her hand and calling him by name with a broad smile. After a moment of silence, Solon said to Lucy, "Nothing has changed for me." He smiles slightly and says he is sure the final outcome will be the same anyway, no matter what family she has. Lucy looked at him warmly and said, "I knew Itiu will definitely become a wonderful teacher for the princess." Lucy smiles playfully and admits that maybe she spoils Philia a little too much. Solon just looks on, feeling the weight of the situation. Just then the door suddenly opened, and Philia came out. She was already in a fresh dress, turned to Lucy, and asked if she was going to change as well. Lucy gets up and says that she will go change now, and then casually adds that she wouldn't mind if Solon helped her afterwards. Philia blushes deeply and fusses, while Solon sits completely stunned. Philia exploded and told Lucy that if she tried to make Solon do something like that, she would never forgive her. Solon tries to quickly pull Lucy out of the room to stop the teasing, and Lucy just laughs and leaves. The door closed behind Lucy, leaving them alone. Philia sighed irritably, still a bit nervous after that conversation. Philia catches Sol on looking at her and asks questioningly, "What are you laughing at?" Solon froze suddenly and began to stammer, desperately searching for words to reply. He keeps this thought to himself. In reality, he finds it incredibly cute how quickly Philia's expressions change, but decides not to say it out loud because it might be taken as rudeness. Philia looks closely at him and asks if the real reason for his laughter is that he actually wanted to go help Lucy change. Solon laughed and told her that this is definitely not the case, and Philia immediately asks without pause, "Then what is it, if you're so sure?" Solon makes an awkward sound, realizing he was caught at a somewhat strange moment, and Philia just throws a teasing look and confirms that he really was thinking about what he shouldn't. When Solon tries to get more out of her, Philia simply says, "It's a secret," and this answer completely surprises him. He cannot hide his shock. In another part of the city, a figure covered in a white cloak walks through narrow streets. The hooded figure stops and looks up. It turns out to be a young blonde girl. She sighs heavily and says that she has finally reached her destination. She gazes at the city's architecture and feels that warm, bitter nostalgia, how familiar it is to be back in the Empire's capital. Walking down the street, a gust of wind suddenly blows and lifts her cloak as she hurries forward. She again returns in thought to that day and admits to herself, although it is her own fault that she did not come to the meeting, her mind is still full of thoughts. Truly upset, she thinks about Solon. It seems to her that it was very mean of him to just leave and abandon her completely alone. In the palace, Solon and Philia settled together on the sofa. Lucy moved closer and teased them, while Rhea stood behind, ready to help. Later, Rhea bustles about her errands, reviews her shopping list, and reminds herself that she still needs to get 3 bottles of wine. Rhea finishes her errands near a street stall. The seller asks if everything is all right, and Rhea answers affirmatively, ordering 3 bottles of wine. The seller gladly helps and begins preparing the order. Just as Rhea is about to leave, an old shopkeeper nearby gets into trouble. He drops a sack of groceries, and potatoes roll across the cobblestones, while Rhea looks back, surprised by the sudden mess. Always ready to help, Rhea tells the old man she will help pick everything up. He is grateful for the help, but their friendly moment is interrupted by someone's shout from the street. Behind them, a carriage has arrived, and the coachman is already losing his composure. He shouts for them to move, asks why they are blocking the road, and demands they step aside immediately. The sudden aggression caught Ria and the elderly man off guard. Both raised their eyes to the driver, shocked by his rudeness, as they were only trying to clear the road. Ria panics, apologizes endlessly, and swears the street will be cleared immediately. The driver is not interested in her excuses, he only sneered contemptuously. In the carriage, the passenger looks around distrustfully. He does not understand the delay. He says he is heading to the imperial palace and asks the driver what the noise is. The driver explains that a maid is standing in the middle of the road, but the person inside does not care at all. He orders the driver to ignore her and proceed to the palace as soon as the way is clear. Meanwhile, the old man finishes gathering his things and thanks Ria for her help. Ria is a little offended by how arrogantly the people in the carriage behaved, but she remains polite and says to the coachman, "Sorry to have kept you waiting, you may go." Passenger bangs on the driver, "Move already." The driver clicks his tongue. It is clear how annoyed he is by all this fuss, and Ria keeps apologizing as they drive away. In the carriage, the passenger is clearly irritated, heading to the palace. Clutching a luxurious scepter, he mutters what a hassle this delay was. He had not a drop of sympathy for Ria. While the carriage rolled on, he thought that even if they had just run her over and killed her, it would mean nothing to him. On the street, Ria watches the carriage drive away, and her heart tightens. Were those people important guests at the upcoming ceremony, and she is ashamed that she got in their way. The old merchant checks if she is okay after being shouted at. Ria forces a brave smile and tells him she is fine. The merchant is outraged. Those people in the carriage were too rude for no reason, but Ria is too kind to hold a grudge. She gently says they were probably just in a mad rush, and there is no point in worrying about it. The conversation darkens when the merchant begins to talk about how dangerous the capital has become. He recalls the July party and how the Minister of Internal Affairs was recently removed, warning Ria to be more cautious when going out alone. Ria knows he is right. She has seen more and more people packing their things and leaving the city. It has become too unstable here. Even when fear hangs over the city, she tries to remain strong. She tightly clutches her bag in her hands and resolutely continues moving forward, despite the risks. Looking at the enormous imperial palace, Ria tries to calm herself that everything will be fine, and immediately her thoughts fly to Solon as she prays for their safety. Meanwhile, elsewhere, someone raises a ceremonial dagger high and calls upon God, apparently preparing for a ritual that keeps everyone on edge. In the grand hall full of nobles, Strauss stands before the crowd with the raised solemn dagger, begins a passionate speech, asks for protection for the emperor and the country, and solemnly vows to single-handedly confront any enemy who dares threaten their land. Strauss looks into the hall with unwavering conviction and says that their struggle will not end until the laws and traditions of the empire bring relief to every citizen. He speaks honestly about the current state of affairs, admitting that the country is going through a difficult period. He says that people in the western regions are now suffering from a massive famine. For a moment, he closes his eyes to show seriousness and adds that the war still continues with no sign that it will end. Suddenly, he raises his voice and shouts that it is precisely because of these hardships that people need to unite. He tells the crowd that unity is the only way forward for the citizens of the empire. While the noble listeners are riveted, Strauss fervently speaks about the necessity to root out and crush secret conspiracies forged in the darkness. When the topic turned to external threats, he named their enemies by name and declared that the ambitions of the foreign republic in Germany must be destroyed. Standing before the enormous imperial coat of arms, he asks, who is truly capable of restoring peace and honor to the Thracian Empire? He answered himself, pointed to the crowd, and shouted that it is the people in this hall who will do it, then led a loud salute in honor of the emperor. The entire hall erupted in applause and cries of "Long live the emperor," the crowd ecstatic calling Strauss the savior of the nation and wishing him glory. The crowd does not subside, shouting about Strauss, and it is clear he is the man of the evening today. Seeing the reaction of the audience, Lucy says that his enormous popularity is exactly what she expected. Professor Lucy is also at the party in an elegant dress, leisurely sipping a drink, while Philia has settled into her chair, and Lucy notes that everything is going quite logically. She told Solon about Strauss, a former military man from a noble family, but in the ranks he did not pretend to be an important officer. He ate the same food as ordinary soldiers, and was even wounded defending those of lower rank, so he is loved by both nobles and common people. Lucy adds that, besides all the public support, it seems the emperor is also his great admirer. Solon and Lucy stood behind Philia in the huge decorated hall, and Lucy's tone changed slightly when she mentioned a drawback. Looking over the seating arrangement in the hall, Lucy admits that she expected this, but points out that they ended up in the very last row, literally as far as possible from the center of events. She turns to Solon and asks if he is surprised that they were pushed so far into the corner. Solon looks a little confused and honestly admits that he is actually surprised by how they are seated. Lucy harshly shatters his illusions. She says that in fact Philia's influence equals only the lowest nobles in the hall, and that in the eyes of the imperial family, she stands at the very bottom of the ladder. Solon is silent, his face serious, while Lucy utters the last thought. She says that because of Philia's low status, she really needs to start rising in society soon. Solon is completely confused about how everyone was seated and asks Lucy why everything is like this. Lucy did not give a direct answer, only said that soon both will understand what the real situation is. Solon looks a bit exhausted from the heavy political talks, so Lucy decides it's time to change the mood. Finally, the boring part of the ceremony is over. Lucy happily says she will go get some drinks. She asks Solon what his plans are, but he looks completely drained and says he will skip the alcohol. Solon noticed Philia, who was quietly sitting in her huge armchair, and asked what she wanted to do now. She looked a bit surprised that she was even asked. He offers to run and bring her anything she desires from the buffet, but Philia only politely smiles and says that everything is fine. Solon does not give up and points to the pastries on the other side of the room, and Philia is silent but cannot take her eyes off the dessert. Giving in a little, Philia shyly says that if they had a chocolate cake, she would really want a piece. Solon gladly agrees and sets off to bring it to her. Looking at her, Solon realizes that because of strict upbringing and low status, she probably never could just enjoy sweets like an ordinary girl, and it pains him to think how much she must have endured. Watching her, Solon decides, let others in the palace be strict with her, but when he is near and cares for her, she must know she can let go. Solon tells Philia that he will go get that cake for her now. She only slightly nods and says, okay. Just as it became a bit cozy, suddenly a powerful explosion tore through the hall. Solon looked around stunned, and smoke and debris flew in all directions. The room turned into complete chaos. People are screaming and rushing, trying to get out. Someone on the floor is shouting, trying to understand what just happened. Through the clouds of smoke, Solon rushed forward and reached out to Philia, shouting her name. He manages to reach her at the last moment, and pressing her to himself, embraces her protectively to shield her from the explosion. Solon anxiously looks her over and asks if she is injured anywhere. Philia is wildly confused by such closeness to him, but manages to whisper that everything is fine. Solon exhales and says that he is simply glad. The main thing is that she is safe. Moving further, Solon stands up, holds Philia behind her back, and intently peers into the smoke to understand what will happen next. Looking at the destruction and the people on the floor, Solon realized this was definitely not just an accident. And at that moment, Lucy emerges from the dust, calls Solon, and anxiously asks if Philia is okay. Lucy told the group that she still has everything under control and asked Solon if he was all right. Solon replied that he was fine and noted that the straws had managed to protect the emperor during the explosion. Lucy is worried terrorists are acting right in the palace. She says that first of all the fires must be extinguished and people rescued, and suddenly a loud rumble sounded, making everyone jump. Solon felt the essence of the attack. It was wind magic, and he began to suspect that more than one mage was behind it. In the next moment, a staff or spear strikes the floor next to Jurin, and the deputy captain of the guard freezes in shock, not understanding how the attackers even got into the Great Hall. A mysterious figure stepped forward, and their voice cut through the silence, addressing those present. Do you still remember the tragedy that happened on July 9? Turns out this person is an old man named Poros, who stands holding a strange staff with an eye, and continues to speak about the tragedy of July 9. Yurin raises his gaze and is completely stunned. He recognizes that man and, stammering, whispered, Poros, not believing his eyes. Yurin decisively demands to know what the Count thinks he is allowed to do, and asks if he has completely lost his mind. Poros says that he is fully sane, looked down at Yurin with a superior glance and throws, why have you, as the vice-captain of the guard, done nothing so far to stop their foolish ruler? Yurin cannot even utter a single word. Yurin asks if the Count really intends to raise the flag of rebellion against the Emperor, and Poros just waved it off. A stupid question, he says, and he does not intend to stop. Poros raises his staff. It begins to glow with a dangerous light. He looked at the guards and simply said, it's a pity that it all happened this way. He begins to utter a spell, calls the wind to gather around him. Poros is not restrained at all. He orders the wind to cut through everything that stands in his way, and Dijiren can only watch as this deadly magic is about to tear the room apart. Just as the wind magic was about to strike, Solon rushed forward and stood directly in the path of the blow, slicing the magical pressure with his sword to protect the people behind. Poros is truly impressed, quietly made a sound of surprise. Someone managed to stop his attack so easily. Djiren suddenly realizes that Solan works for the princess, while Solan wonders how this old man knows so well who is entering Philia's inner circle. Solan holds his sword at the ready and sharply tells Poros that he is too cruel, recalling the July party, the very group that caused all this chaos. Solan introduced himself properly, but Poros already knew who he was, called him Hero Solan, and asked why a man of such rank would stand in their way. Solan explains his motive is simple. He just does not want his master to have to look at corpses anymore. Hearing this, Poros concludes that Solan has chosen to side with the Empire. Solan looks around and corrects him. He actually does not take anyone's side in this conflict. He just cannot stand how the party, July, conducts affairs, and it is precisely because of this that he stops them. Poro is clearly upset about Solan's position, asks if this is really his opinion, and sincerely says he thought someone like Solan should understand what drives their group. Solan only sighed it's a pity they can't come to an agreement, and immediately turned back to Djiren, asking if he could move despite the injury. Djiren was completely confused, but Solan interrupted him. There is no time to stand and talk. Djiren looked down and saw that his wounds were already healing, was stunned. Solan smiled and explained that he had only applied a bit of magical first aid to patch him up, so after that he would still need a real doctor. Solan clenches his sword and orders Djiren to start the rescue and lead the people out, saying that the deeper parts of the building have not been severely damaged yet, so there is still time to save everyone. Poro falls silent for a moment, looks seriously at Solan, and asks if he really forgot what happened that day. Solan did not remain silent for a moment, immediately said that he remembered everything as if it were yesterday, July 9, 2 years ago, when people were starving and the crowd marched to the imperial palace to protest. Looking back at the tragedy, Solan paints a picture. The emperors, frightened by the despair of the crowd, decided simply to kill everyone who was there. He continues the story, explaining how people who only asked for help were slaughtered by direct order of the emperor, and especially emphasizes that many children died in that massacre. Solan clearly makes it understood. He is not on the side of the empire because of what they did. He directly tells Poro that he has no intention at all to support or defend those past actions. Solan, looking back at this bloody massacre, looks at Poros and says that he is doing the same, slaughtering servants and nobles who cannot even fight back with magic. Poros has become what he himself says he hates. Poros does not believe Solan's logic at all and decisively says that he is mistaken. As a nobleman, he is obliged to save ordinary people, and the blood on his hands is only a necessary sacrifice if it finally allows overthrowing the emperor. Solan does not back down. He looks at the people Poros has wounded and says to him, if you can justify the murder of exactly those citizens you say you are saving, then you are definitely an enemy. Poros froze for a moment, lowered his eyes, and quietly said that now he understands what Solan stands for. Poros sees that understanding is impossible, so he decides to end the conversation, says that nothing can be done, and strikes the floor hard with the base of his staff. As soon as the staff hit the ground, a huge shining magical circle emerged from beneath the soil, and Poros stood right in the center of the pentagram as the mana began to surge. Wasting no time, Poros launches an attack. He casts a spell called Windblade. Sharp gusts of magic fly straight at Solan. Solan is ready. He swings his sword at the right moment and tears the wind spell to pieces before it can touch him. When the magic subsides, Solan finally clearly sees which magical circle Poros is using to power his attacks. Solan reached into his gear and with a sly smile said he has his own little trick he wants to show. He throws a handful of papers and shouts loudly that this should be enough. Instantly, several magical circles flare up simultaneously, creating a wall of spells to counter the attack. Solan's papers rise into the air and completely caught Count Poros by surprise, and the old nobleman cannot believe his eyes at the insane speed. Everything starts moving as magical talismans activate one after another around him. Poros begins to sweat as he realizes what he is seeing. He recognizes these things and, stunned, asks if Solan is really fighting with talismans. Solan does not give him a second to recover. He dashes forward lightning fast, carelessly throws the phrase, "excuse me," aside and shortens the distance even before Poros manages to react. Everything happens in a second. Solan drops Poros to the ground and pins him down, and the Count lets out a painful groan, unable to break free from the sudden tackle. Poros is stuck right in the center of a huge magical circle. He falls silent, finally realizing that Solan completely outsmarted him and lured him into a trap. The palm lowers to the floor and touches it. Small bubbles and ripples begin to appear in the mana around. Suddenly, huge walls of water rose from beneath the ground and formed a solid barrier around Poros. The Count raised his eyes and understood that he was now locked in a giant water cage. Poros actually, despite the situation, Looks a bit impressed. He says that this is exactly what he expected from the hero, and adds that he never thought he would end up in a water prison spell. Solon is not interested in praise and directly tells the Count that he overestimates him. Seeing how calmly Poros behaves, he realizes he is too relaxed for someone who was just caught, which means there are definitely allies nearby. Solon becomes serious and looks Poros straight in the eyes, demanding an answer. Where exactly is the rest of his group hiding? Everything looks usual in the palace until a strange sound rings out. Rhea jumps and looks around to understand what happened, and Solon also catches it and wonders where it is coming from. The scene shifts to the moment of attack. One of the guards is completely terrified. He feels that everything is falling apart and can barely comprehend the news about the officials. A giant column of black smoke shot upward, a sign of a terrible disaster. Nearby, someone started shouting, calling for Princess Philia and Solon, fearing the worst. Flames everywhere. A young official tears his way through the heat and smoke, grumbling from the effort and barely squeezing through the debris. The smoke chokes him. He starts coughing and realizes that the fire is spreading too fast for them to handle. In despair, he calls the princess and Professor Lucy. Mid the debris, Professor Lucy and Philia pressed against each other, covered in soot and exhausted, and amidst the chaos began calling Solon to find them. Lucy tries to hold everything together, but looks bad. They understand they are in trouble because neither she nor Solon are really experts in high-level water magic needed to extinguish such a large flame. And worse, the mages of the Imperial Palace are completely tied up. They give all their power to keep the Emperor safe, leaving everyone else to fend for themselves. The situation becomes even grimmer when they realize all exits to the outside are sealed. People lie broken on the floor, and it looks like they are completely trapped. The young official is on the verge of a breakdown. He rushes through the corridors, sweating and panicking because he has no idea how to save everyone. Mid the chaos, a voice rises to the heavens, and above the ruined hall, a huge magical circle begins to glow brightly. Solon raises his eyes, completely stunned by the sudden light. The magical circle pulses. The voice pleads for rescue, asking for everyone in the burning palace to be saved from disaster. People are still screaming somewhere behind. The fire rages, but below on the floor, the air around Philia begins to change. Suddenly, the sound of rushing water spreads everywhere. The scorching heat begins to recede. The magic worked and extinguished the flames throughout the hall. Solon stands, soaked to the bone, looks around and realizes the fire is truly out. He doubts whether they are really saved, but then Philia calls him by name. Philia is simply happy that everyone is safe and says that it was Lucy who protected her in the worst moments. Lucy turns to Solon and asks if he is okay and if he was hurt in all this commotion. Solon tells her that he is fine, and Philia gives him a huge, relieved smile. It is clear how happy she is that he stands before her whole and unharmed. Solon kneels down and takes Philia's hand, apologizing for making her worry so much, and Philia immediately says, "Don't worry, you are the one who came to protect me and everyone else." She does not let go of his hand and quietly says that if he had not been nearby, everything could have been much worse, so he really has nothing to apologize for. Continuing, Solon becomes a bit more serious and tells her that it is not quite so. He admits that the water magic that just saved them was actually not from him, and Philia remains completely confused. While Solon is still holding Philia's hand, a voice calls his name from the side, and this completely catches him by surprise. Solon raises his eyes, and as soon as he sees the person standing there, everything clicks. He understands. The magic that saved them was from someone he knew. He says the name Sophia aloud, and she stands in the rain serious, with a staff in her hands. In memories about Sophia at the academy, other students were constantly whispering they could not believe that she was the one who managed to enroll and become the youngest honor student of her course. The rumors did not stop there. Some pupils claimed that she got in only because of connections with some influential noble family, and they kept repeating that she was only 9 years old. Classmates were offended by her coldness and complained that although she was younger, she did not even try to smile or be friendly. People accused her of behaving as if she was better than everyone else, so she spent all her time alone, sitting under a tree far from the other children. Sophia looked with an empty gaze and realized that the academy turned out to be as lonely as her life at home. When she saw people moving away from her, it seemed to her that wherever she went, she would always remain a stranger. She sat as if in her own world when suddenly someone approached and said hello, which made her jump a little. Sophia raised her head, her eyes wide open with surprise. She was torn from her lonely thoughts. Young Solon stands there with a friendly smile, holding a book, introduces himself, and asks Sophia if he can sit right next to her. Then Sophia was convinced that she would always remain a stranger, even in the academy. But when she sat under the tree thinking she had no one, Solon simply came up and changed everything. The scene returns to the present chaos after the attack. People are bustling everywhere, Workers shout for those with minor injuries or who feel unwell to come for help, and everyone desperately strives to get treatment as soon as possible. Sophia, in a hood and holy attire, found herself in the very center of events. She tells the crowd that she will accept everyone in turn, but one woman in panic begs for her child to be examined first. Next, Sophia kneels to help Count Poros, who is sitting in a chair. When she finishes, she asks him if it hurts anywhere else. Poros looks away and says that everything is fine. Sophia replies that she is glad to hear that, but asks him to be sure to immediately inform someone if anything starts to feel strange. Poros sat deep in his thoughts, unable to believe that such an influential nobleman as he turned out to be a member of the extremist party, July. People nearby begin to whisper about what happened. They say that Poros will definitely not escape the death penalty after all this and is getting exactly what he deserves, and most of all they are glad that the straw effigies of the emperor and the prime minister came out unharmed. Under the huge magical circle on the ceiling, the conversation does not subside. People understand that they would be in real trouble if not for the saint who saved them. But some are annoyed by the mystery why Sophia even came to the ceremony today, and no one really knows why she was there. Solon looks at the house and anxiously wonders if Sophia is really inside. Meanwhile, Sophia sits outside in the company of people, all silent until a quiet sound of surprise breaks the silence. One of them asks Sophia if she is really quitting the night shifts, and she, looking sadly at her knees, simply replies, "Yes." The sorceress looks completely shocked by this news, but Sophia says that she actually planned to leave from the very beginning. Next to her, a man is upset and tries to argue, saying that even if she planned it, there is still a lot to consider here. He emphasizes that the Night Order is what Solon, Cryon, and Sophia have built together over the last 4 years, and adds that although Solon was expelled, Sophia is still the captain of the entire organization. Sophia looks at Solon and tells him frankly, the only reason she endured being captain at all was that he was there and supported her. She explains that there is much more behind her decision than it seems. Sophia admits the Knights no longer feel like the place where she belongs. Hearing this, Solon turns away, unable to say anything except her name. Sophia reaches out and firmly grasps Solon's hands, looks him in the eyes, and asks if he still remembers the promise they made when they were freshmen. She reminds him that they swore to create the most powerful order of knights the world has ever seen. Solon turns back to her and assures that he definitely remembers how they made that pact. Sophia adds that there was something more there. She glances at the symbol of the Knights of St. Sophia and frankly admits they really became famous as the strongest in the empire. And then she says that the promise is truly unfulfilled only because he became stronger, and recalls how in his youth she told him that becoming the best is only the first step. Looking Salu straight in the eyes to the right, Sophia begins to speak frankly about what she really feels. She tells him that her goal has always been what they could do together. She explains that she dreamed of creating a place where they both would truly feel at home. For her, it does not matter how strong the knights are if the order did not become a home for the two of them. Solon can only whisper her name, continuing, and admits that he knows he cannot just leave the knights on a whim, and understands that the captain should not abandon his duties. Just as they were talking, suddenly a loud voice cut through the air. Someone asked if she really plans to quit the night shifts, and the whole group froze. A stern man in noble attire with a serious expression on his face approaches them. Sophia pales and realizes that this is her father, who has just appeared. He called her by name, and Sophia clearly flinched. She looked completely frightened seeing him standing there. Sophia's father reminds her that she went on the night shift, although he was against it from the start, and looking at her asks, "Are you really going to quit everything after 4 years of work?" He becomes even harsher and asks if she is really throwing everything away for the sake of a commoner. Sophia looks completely scared in the background, and Solon just stands and endures the insult. Sophia defends Solon and asks her father to stop being so mean, but he does not want to hear it and immediately cuts her off. "Shut up." Solon recognizes the man Marquis Gorgi, and with a bitter thought feels that he has not changed at all. He knows that the Marquis is exactly the person who behaves extremely rudely to everyone he considers inferior. The sign does not cease, reminding Sophia that 4 years ago she said she could help the family if she became famous as an adventurer. He says the only reason he ever allowed her to do this is that promise. He says directly, her nighttime orders now bring in a lot of money, and it is because of this that he tolerates her selfishness. Sophia is clearly suffering and cannot even find words to respond. She tries to start a sentence to explain what she feels, but a lump in her throat chokes her. She is completely stuck and under her father's pressure cannot utter a word. Just as Sophia is about to break down, Solon steps forward right in front of her, stands in the way of her father, and addresses the Marquis directly, catching them both by surprise. Solon tells the Marquis that Sophia has already done more for his house than necessary. Her success has glorified the family, and almost all the money she earned she has already given to him. The Marquis is not worried at all, and challengingly asks what his point is. He says that it is quite natural for a child to give everything to their parents, while one of the other girls silently watches this heated confrontation nearby. Marquis Gorge grabbed Sophia by the hand and told her to go with him, adding that as soon as they return to the house, they will immediately start arrangements for marriage with Creon. Sophia exclaimed as he pulled her along. Sophia tries to protest and begs her father to stop, but he does not listen. Solon watches from the side, completely disappointed that he can do nothing now to help her. Gorge scolds Sophia to keep moving, dragging her across the yard, while Solon and the others can only stand and watch as she is taken away. Solon clearly reaches his limit, gritting his teeth as he watches that man treat Sophia like property and mutters his own name, trying to stay calm. At that moment a voice rang out, "Marquis." It was Princess Philia, and there was not a trace of joy on her face. Philia approaches them directly and tells the Marquis that she would be grateful if he did not take her guest away whenever he pleases. Solon looks completely bewildered by her sudden appearance. Gorgeous abruptly stops and looks around to see who spoke to him. He still firmly holds Sophia's hand, but his attention is now fully focused on the girl who just interrupted him. The Marquis is completely confused and asks what is happening. While Solon stands stunned, he did not expect the princess to intervene in this way. Philia walked forward with a quiet, polite smile on her lips, and despite all the chaos around, she maintained the authoritative posture of the imperial family. Gorgeous looks at her fiercely, clearly irritated that some child is talking back to him, and coldly asks, "Who are you to address me like that?" All attention is focused on the royal emblem on Philia's neck. It immediately draws everyone's gaze. Marquis Gorgeous recognized the emblem as a sign of the imperial family and immediately broke into a sweat, realizing he might have made a mistake. He slightly bowed and sincerely admitted that he was seeing her for the first time. Gorgeous narrowed his eyes, trying to figure out who she could be. He paused for a moment, trying to find a name for this face. Finally, he asks somewhat uncertainly if she is the 17th Princess Iris, because now, having learned that she is from the royal family, he tries to show respect. Philia giggles and says he almost guessed right, but not quite, explaining that Iris is her older sister, and adds that she herself is the 18th Princess Philia. Gorgeous completely loses his head and begins to apologize for his rudeness. Solon watches from behind, and Gorgeous fervently asks the princess why she is even spending time with his daughter. Philia does not back down and firmly reminds him that she already said, "Do not take her guest away." Gorgeous tries to argue, insisting that he is the father here and it is up to him to decide what to do with Sophia. Philia smiles and agrees that he is her father, but she is not done with him yet. She looks him straight in the eyes and firmly says that a man who does not even want to listen to what others say is completely unfit to be a father. Gorgeous was left speechless from the insult, and Sophia and Solon stood in complete shock. They could not believe that the princess had put him in his place so directly.